around the timing of this just immediately before the schools break up, and we had in that communication asked consideration of extending the consultation beyond the proposed closure date of the 27th of September. I think at this stage I just would ask members to note the letter, but I would want to suggest that as soon as we are back from recess that we would want to be undertaking urgent follow-up to ensure that there is maximum engagement around that consultation, to ensure we hear from all of the stakeholders that we need to. Are we agreed with that approach at this stage? Great. Okay. That is fine. Item 4.2, I do just want to draw members' attention to a letter received from the Peaches project, and that's at page 15 of tabled papers, and it's a very long and detailed piece of correspondence, and I would encourage members to take the time to go through it. You may not have had the time to do so just based on when it landed. It's in relation to the appropriate and adequate provision and funding of special schools. I know that the group were very, very keen to get a briefing slot with the committee on an informal basis before recess, but in terms of timings we just haven't been able to do that in a way that I felt would facilitate the most meaningful engagement for them with the best attendance from members. So we are proposing a face-to-face lunchtime meeting with members when we return after recess, and I think just given the sort of the breadth of the issues they are raising across the special schools sector, I think it would be appropriate for members to take that time. Are we agreed with that approach and to confirm that for the group? Agreed. Okay. That moves us on to draft minutes then as the next item on the agenda. I would propose they are a complete and accurate record of the meeting of the 19th of June. Are members agreed? Great. Okay, Mark. Okay. Thanks very much. So apologies, there's been a bit to get through there and some of the more administrative bits of business, but that does move us on to our first briefing of the session today. So that's item 6 in your packs. And it's going to be a briefing from the Transforming Local Youth Work in NI collective, and if Jim, you could just bring the witnesses through. I would refer members to the briefing note from the clerk at page 89 and a briefing paper from the collective at page 90 of your packs, which I hope you've all had the time to have a look at. So everybody just wants to get settled, and then we can do formal introductions and go from there. There's quite a few of you here today, so it's find a seat where you can. Good afternoon, everybody, and you are very welcome here today at the last sitting of this session of the Education Committee. And it's great to have you here, and it's great to have a collective group representing the non-statutory youth provision across Northern Ireland. I think it's really welcome, and the committee has been so keen to hear that voice from the sectors that you represent. So it is great to have you here. I'll just run through who we have in attendance today, and if I miss anybody, let me know. But you're all very welcome to do your own intros when we get to that. So I have here Sheila Morris from Youth Action NI, John Lynch from Youth Work Alliance, Michael Dudley from Boys and Girls Clubs NI, Stephen Dallas from the Bites Project, Tony Silcock from Youth Initiatives NI. There may well be others here that aren't on my list, so I apologise if I've missed any of those at all, and please do make your own introductions when we come to you. So at this stage, it really would be handing over to you to bring forward any opening remarks or presentation you want to make. I would say that would be up to 10 minutes, by no means a target. So if you don't need to use the full 10 minutes, that's fine. And then we'll move to question and answer. And we usually approach it with a sort of 5 minutes per member in terms of question and answer to get through that. So just urge members and witnesses to get to questions and answers as promptly as we can, because I think there'll be a lot of interest in this subject. So over to you guys at this stage. I don't know who wants to kick off.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to come and present our paper around transforming local youth work in Northern Ireland. I'm Stephen Dallas, Chief Executive of Bites. I'm going to let the rest of the guys, because it's nice to see a face in the name. Go ahead, guys.
Yep, so Michael Dudley, CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs Northern Ireland.
Sheila Morris, Senior Leader for Youth Action Northern Ireland.
John Lynch, CEO, Youth Work Alliance.
Tony Silcock, Youth Initiatives Northern Ireland.
and our entourage, Orange Swifties. They are here with us. From all, because this is a big, it's not just us, it's beyond. So if you had 15 seats here, you could have 15 people in a row kind of doing this contribution. So I'm going to do just a couple of minutes of an introduction to give a bit of context. So we're delighted to be here today to present us our paper. One of the things we would say is one of our functions as part of our regional role, if you like, to support youth work is we're funded by the Education Authority for Regional Strategic Funding, what it's called, it's a funding pot, and that means we support with governance, workforce, curriculum. That gives you a wee bit of context, because that's important as we go through this to justify what we're going to try and say today. So initially in 2023, a couple of us tried to have a conversation about, how do we support these local groups more effectively? That was really what we were doing. At that point, I think we'd all be fairly say it was quite competitive. We didn't talk too much to each other. We were trying to be, close the ranks, and sort of look after our own wee patch. Really, that started to fall off, just really April, May, June last year. John and Youth Work Alliance and the guys in Youth Work Alliance have been engaged in EA and DE for a long time around, local services and what they wanted to see. But it's fair to say we didn't have one threaded message. We do today. What you have in your hand really is our contribution to try and find solutions for local youth work in the region. So what I'd say is the meeting of minds we had, one thing that helped us to almost feel connected, really feel connected, was this idea that we all really care about maximising what local youth services can access in this region. That is the silver thread. It is really, really important just to say that. A few weeks ago, we heard the input from the Independent Review, Education Review, here with you guys, and they were great. Hopefully, we measure up. We'll see how that goes. But they spoke a lot of things around the need for youth services budget, and in the paper they talk about almost a doubling of it. That would be awesome. If you could deliver that, we will be very, very content. But you can't. The Minister's been very clear, you guys are dealing with a constrained budget. We need to look at this in a new way. We need to deliver things in a different kind of way, if you like. And this is going to require collective thinking from the community and voluntary sector and the EA. And to be very clear for us, we think that currently the way things are laid out, influence for our planning and investment lies solely with the EA. And that's part of what you'll see within the paper today. That's a really important point for to talk about as we go through this. So why are we here today? Well, just to be very clear about what we are as a group and our network. You had our uniform colleagues here a couple of weeks ago as well, and they were really good, and they'll be sitting at home tonight scoring us and texting us as well, I'm sure. But what I would say is that we're all united in the uniform sector and what we do in terms of how we support children and young people. Our network's slightly different, but in what we support. So you might have like a 20-week club, maybe two hours a week in a church providing a youth service. I have one of those on my doorstep on a Saturday night, and it's a godsend, and it's really, really important for what we offer as a sector. But at the same time, you might have clubs that are open 5, 6, 7 nights a week, wrapping around counselling, employability support, doing outdoor learning, really, really sophisticated jobs. That's what we try and represent. So it's really massive in terms of a scale and kind of in terms of a spectrum. But from our paper, you can see we are really closely connected with the grassroots community and voluntary organisations across the north here. And our network, we would say, represents around 600 groups. That is, from somebody who's been doing this a long time, you really are at the top end of 90% or more. We really do touch a lot of these local groups and provide support. 280 of those are registered with the Education Authority for youth services. And this is probably one of the unique things that definitely sets us apart in terms of what we think our role could be. There are 96 of those 280 groups delivering on EA local funding. Be very clear, that's pretty much 100%. Anybody who's receiving local funding from the Education Authority for local youth services, we're the ones that are getting the phone calls about the pressures they face, the difficulties that they're under. We feel as if we've got a really important role to be able to inform you effectively around the current situation. So we're here today to really ask for help, a very clear help. We're asking you to help us with one of the most significant transformations of local youth services and to help us to lead that vanguard for change. We really are appealing for you to help us because we feel as if we've got to a point where we've done everything that we can and being very clear to you today. In terms of the process that we've been through, the paper that you hold today, we have engaged all, like, as far and wide across our membership as we can, you know, our boards and all sorts of things. I'm fed up writing it again and rewriting. We're all just, you know, we'll keep on doing it, but we've done a lot on that. We've shared it with our colleagues on the uniform sector, who've given us feedback. Colleagues in the Irish medium sector have given us feedback, and colleagues across young farmers that kind of have that really strong rural. We've shared it with everybody. We've taken feedback. We've shared it with the EA Programme Board, who are responsible for the Youth Service Funding Review. To name those people, that would have been Cara McCullough, who was here a few weeks ago as from DE, the policy lead. Celine McStravick, Chief Executive of SNCFA, in her role within the Programme Board, and the Director of Finance at the time within EA, Simon Christie. And we'd pay tribute to them all because they've made the paper better and they've helped us. The other two groups of people, just let you know, we've met the EA Director of Children and Young People Services, Dale Hanna, and we've been able to kind of share this paper with him and his team. And department officials, at the request of the Minister requested he would meet us, and we took that feedback as well. So we really are, we've done a lot. We feel like we've got to a strong place. We feel like that our asks are definitely part of a solution that could go forward. And we're really here to talk about two things. First one is around, we really would appeal to the Minister really strongly to establish a local youth work sector planning and investment forum. We really think that would be a game changer because it would equalise the power relationships that we're currently under, and it would help to get a conversation about how we're planning on investing. So John and Micheál, when you ask questions about Ask One, they're going to be the go-to people, okay? They'll be the go-to, and I'll try and coordinate that as from your questions. And our second ask is going to be that you would ask the Education Authority to reduce the bureaucracy of the EA financial verification process for local groups. And Sheila and Tony are going to take those questions, and that's how we'll try to bat them off. So we are, over to you, Chair, we're going to hand back, and I think I did that in under 10 minutes, so I'm happy about that.
It's 7 minutes precisely,
Perfect.
so that's spot on. Thank you for that, Stephen. And look, I just want to reiterate, it is great to have you here. It's taken a wee while to maybe get this meeting over the line, just with sort of the various competing commitments of the committee, but it really is great to have you here. And I think one of the things that we're really conscious of as a committee, whenever we're in very, very constrained financial times, which we undoubtedly are, yes, we need to hear from groups with a stake in the education sector about how that presents challenges to them. But sometimes if you just hear the challenges, it can leave you with sort of nowhere to go, and you're just really letting the department know, or the EA know, things they're already aware of. But when groups come together with a really collaborative approach and bringing solutions to the table, I think that is the bit that is really helpful and positive in the context we're in at the moment. So this is really welcome and really, really timely. So you've been really clear. Your paper sets out really clearly what your asks are, and you've highlighted the two ones that you're most focused on, and that would be the Planning and Investment Forum and the reduction in bureaucracy. Could I just ask, really just to kick off directly, in terms of your key asks, what has the engagement with EA and the department been like? So effectively, what is their response to your asks when you've presented them to them?
I think it'd be good, John and Micheál could give some feedback on that, and then try and do that like that.
Yeah, look, initially, if we go back to it, Stephen alluded to, the need to have this Plan and Investment Forum arises from the fact that the Education Act, first and foremost, doesn't give EA the power to deliver through the voluntary and community sector. Equally, Priorities for Youth doesn't and hasn't given EA the direction to prioritise the voluntary sector as the preferred method of delivery. So there's a certain element of protection within that, and the current structure allows EA to work from a perspective where they protect their assets first in terms of where they go forward, and then the voluntary sector gets the allocation coming out the other side of it. So it's trying to come to it and say, okay, we acknowledge that, we understand that. We are not saying that we want the Education Authority to disappear. We're saying very clearly that they have a role, but what we are saying is, since 2016, once we lost the Youth Council for Northern Ireland and we lost YouthNet, there is no structure, there is no Plan and Investment Board, which then allows EA to make decisions unilaterally based on the budget allocation that they have, based on protection of their services moving forward. So what we're saying in this is we're still getting that kickback and that resistance, that's still what's there. There's the legal context that talks about the due regard in terms of whether planning services, but that all it talks about is due regard. It doesn't talk about actually empowering the voluntary sector. It doesn't talk about making them the preferred method of delivery of where they go through. So we have to get into an arena where we can start to have that conversation and that platform to create that, so that we can move that forward.
Micheál, do you want to come in?
Yeah, well, I suppose
what we're looking at is the ring fence investment into the voluntary sector. I think that's very important because we have to create a sector that is attractive for people to want to get involved in, people want to stay in, because at the minute, you have these community assets. That's exactly what they are. They're community assets. If you look at John Paul II in Ardoyne, it's been there for 50 years. You look at Ledley Hall in East Belfast, they're for 80 years. They're supporting their communities through thick and thin. And at the minute, all they're really doing is getting squeezed the past 10 years. Their budgets are becoming smaller. The requirements are becoming greater. And to be honest with you, we're hemorrhaging workers left and right. We're hemorrhaging volunteers because it's not an attractive place to get involved in. Ring fencing a budget and a percentage of the Department for Education's budget would not only be a commitment from the Department for Education that we value your service, but it would also give them people peace of mind that they can strategically plan. They can look ahead, they can build their internal infrastructure rather than just consistently firefighting, which is what a lot of these organisations are having to do. Just firefighting daily to keep their doors open. And at the heart of this, it's children, young people and volunteers that are losing out. And the investment and planning forum coming in would be a way for us to be able to sit and represent their interests, for us to be able to liaise back and disseminate information back to them to say, folks, here's what's going to happen. Here's what do you feel like needs to happen? What are your priorities and how can we best represent them? Because at the minute, you talked about what engagement we're having with the Education Authority. Any engagement we're having to reach out to them to request them to come and meet with us because there's no appropriate forum to do so. So like the likes of RAG is there to discuss themes within the local development plan and the regional development plan. There's the Department for Education subgroups to inform the next policy cycle, but that could be 4 years. In the immediacy, this is an alternative that can be established, that we already have an idea of what it would look like.
And that's already helpful. It was probably unfair of me to ask you for what's the EA's views on your proposal. I mean, that's ultimately the committee can seek that from the EA, and I think that's likely to be an action arising from this. From my perspective, hearing you speak about this, I mean, it's not a million miles away from some of the recommendations in the independent review around area planning for schools, the need for a strategic oversight around how we reorganise our school estate to make sure that it's meeting the needs of local communities. And ultimately, this is what it's about. It's not about protecting one organisation over another. It's making sure that we make the most of the resources we have available to us to meet the needs of local communities and meet the needs of the young people in those communities, but to do that on a strategic basis. So I can certainly say I think the proposal seems to me to have a lot of merit to it, and I'd be very interested, and I hope members would agree with me, and I'm sure we'll hear as we go around in terms of engaging with the EA to really seek their views on what can be done to take this forward.
There's another wee part to that in terms of how we can look at. We know that budgets are tight. We know that budgets are staying. We understand that there's costs that are inescapable to the Education Authority in meeting their need. But if we start to look at the budget slightly different, and we do start to look at vacancies within the service, and start to look at, is there a viable option? Is there an alternative within the voluntary sector that's there? And the reason why we talk about vacancies is because we're not after people's jobs. People aren't in them if they're vacant. And the harsh reality in this is that if we don't fill those jobs, either through a statutory provision or voluntary sector, it's young people who are losing out. Young people aren't getting access to service because there's vacancies are there. So we want to try and get into a conversation around how do we actually in this Plan and Investment Forum challenge because prior to youth talked about challenging the historical deployment of youth work in the voluntary sector. It doesn't talk about doing it in the statutory sector. So how do we look at challenging the historical deployment in the statutory sector? And actually, is there a viable option? Is there another way to increase the voluntary sector's capacity to deliver that better meets the needs of children and outcome? And sometimes the answer might be no, there's not. But at least have the conversation. Let's have a conversation and a discussion around how we do that.
I think this relates to so many other issues we've considered. I think when we talk about special educational needs, there's always the sort of discussion around people feel like they're just facilitating a system. The system looks like this, and we'll tweak it, we'll tinker with it to get the right outcomes. But sometimes you need to look at the system and is it the right model to deliver. So
I probably would say on that we're really, really excited what DE have got emerging from their policy forum.
Yeah.
They are. I mean, it's good. The atmosphere, the connection, it's strong. Like it's really. We're all like going, this is great. What do we do right here that's making this emerge? This is just great. But as John, as Michal was saying, like the last policy took 8 years.
Yeah.
We need something now. To be so crystal clear, we really do. And the Mihaal's points, like we would email, of course, as a courtesy, you do your meetings, but we don't do what John's described. Like, let's have a discussion about the vacancies, and has a voluntary sector group emerged in the last 20 or 30 years? When the education order was written in '86, they weren't thinking the voluntary sector could grow, but it has. But it has, and we have to. A lot of these things that EA face at the minute, it's very hard to say we're going to not fill that post, because it's what you've normally done for 30 years. And this is very much about a status quo conversation. And the system and the architecture, I feel DE will move to a new place, but I don't think we can wait 3 or 4 years. It's too fragile to wait that long.
That is all really positive, and I want to bring other members in. I just want to ask one final question, which is on the slightly longer term bit, just in terms of the strategy, in terms of the overarching strategy for youth work. Do you feel that there is currently enough clarity between where the balance sits between statutory and non-statutory, and how that's prioritised? Because it feels like maybe as what is written down doesn't quite match with reality on the ground in terms of statutory filling the gaps that the voluntary sector's not providing. I mean, in terms of development of policy, is that an area you'd like to see clarity in? And I'll just ask briefly, because I do want to bring other members in.
I certainly think it is. I think it's a need to actually, Stephen alluded to this at the very start, how do we create that balance of equality, where the sector is recognised for what it does and what it contributes, and how much we can actually make the budget work a wee bit further to maximise the outcomes for children and young people. I think there's certainly one of the synapses that we do have around actually let's dissect the policy, the old policy, and let's get into actually thinking about what worked, why did it work, where was the voluntary sector's role in that, and then let that use the influence into the next policy. But I do believe the current structures lend itself to EA working from a protective point of view, where they protect their assets before they move into to empower the voluntary sector to deliver. And that's as a fault of the structure that's set up and the policies that are in place.
And that is all really helpful. I will move on. I would just want to pay tribute. There are, I know in my own local area, some really, really good statutory services. I think it's clear, and I don't think you're approaching this from a pitting one sector against the other. It's just let's maximise the resources we've got and work that together collegiately on that. So it's all very positive. Look, I'll hand over at this stage. I'm going to pass to Danny, because I know the Deputy Chair has said that Danny will cover questions from that side, and then I'll bring any other members in who want to indicate.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming in today. I know it's not easy for all of us to come together to do this paper because of how funding comes about. These are always pitted against each other, so this is great, and I think it's a massive step in the right direction. I suppose just the kickstart us off, I'd just like to know the key experiences and developments that got us to this juncture today.
Even just in terms of our consultation with the sector, the sector's been so fragmented the past 10, 15 years. Like, we have been pitched against each other inadvertently. I don't think that was the intention of people, but that's what's happened. Yeah. And it's very difficult to work together whenever that wee bit of hostility is there. We've put that aside now, because I think a lot of things have changed in the sector. We've had discussions the past 12 months. We've got through a lot of the historical issues that we've had. And we're looking to move into a place where we can work together, we can all coexist, and we all can flourish, because at the end of the day we all have specialisms. We put them together, we create a really good service for children and young people, and we can support communities way better. And I think that was the fore of our thinking throughout that. So in terms of getting to this situation, this position, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. There was plenty of hard conversations, but we've got here. We've had a lot of discussions with the voluntary sector and our members as well to get here, which is important, because this isn't just us saying this is what we think needs to happen. This came from the ground up, and I think the members and local organisations, because they're so vulnerable at the minute, I think they were asking us, you need to come together. This is all. Anything that's happened in the past is done. Put it all aside. And the local organisations were pushing this, so everything you have in front of you derives from local provision. And one of the key things that we had a consultation in Dunstilly there last month with, I think it was 50 members that showed up, and we were sort of asking them, what do you think about the paper? Is there any recommendations on the paper? How could we maybe change the terminology to make it better? And one of the things that came out of it was a young person that was there, representative from an organisation in Derry, and they were saying that they're in the final year of doing their youth work degree, and they've had real concerns about where they want to go in a career, because they're looking at the voluntary sector and saying, do I really want to go into this? You know, where it's just stress and anxiety, and do I really need that? You know, and we were sort of, but at the end of it, they sort of turn around and says, it's actually really good, because now we actually feel I have a lot more confidence in terms of where we're going as a sector, and that was really reassuring for us, you know, because that's coming from the people that we're trying to support here. And I think getting back to that point as well about the Education Authority, we're not looking to displace them in any shape or form. You know, we're not looking to step on their toes in any way. You know, all we're looking to do is put a structure in place that allows us to work collaboratively, and the investment planning forum would be the best thing to do that in the immediacy.
I think just to add that, Michael, one of the key things that gelled us together is get rid of all of our stuff, our baggage, our egos, what our organisation have done over the past. Go on and have those hard conversations, because this is about children and young people. This is about giving them the best service that they need in the areas in which they need it, whether that be through street-based youth work, Irish medium youth work, SEN, whatever that may be. Outdoor, there's a wealth of experience that sits in this panel, and the reality is that if we continue to be separate, then we're not supporting our members. We're not doing what we need to do for the sector. So we had to say, right, okay, put the personal stuff to one side, sit down and say, how do we drive forward? And we found that common ground in young people, and then the mission to protect frontline youth work was the key goal for us.
I just have one point on that, Danny, as well. It won't last forever, what you've got right now. This is hard. We need to deliver, because local groups will go, didn't work, they want someone else. You do have a window here. We do feel we've got a really good window. I just wanted to sort of say that as well. So anyway.
Thank you. And see, just regarding the youth work vacancies within the EA, what type of positions are we talking about here? Grade levels. What do you mean by it?
When we're talking about vacancies, Danny, we're talking about obviously the jobs that aren't there. So there's a lot of complexities, there's a lot of jobs within the service, but we're really talking about ones that aren't attached to centres at the moment, ones that aren't attached to part-time staff or health that. So you're really looking at your area worker posts that are out there, that exist across the region, that aren't filled. And is there a voluntary sector provider beside them that can actually look at that? We need the Planning Investment Board to actually get into the nuts and bolts of why is it that a centre can't be passed across the voluntary sector. Is there a capacity of looking at leadership and management offsite? Is there a capacity of looking at a joint delivery in terms of there, if there's an option of increasing the provision for children and young people? So primarily we're trying to focus on jobs where there's no one in, and primarily that they're not attached to the centre, because that becomes more complex for you. They actually look at, right, who looks after that centre and how do we work that out? How do we look after the part-time staff that's sitting there? But when you have jobs that are vacant who have none of that attached to it, that becomes the option in terms of what's there.
Yeah. No, I think it's important to say that we're not looking to take existing EA jobs out of EA. That's really important for us. But there are existing vacancies that we feel that the community and voluntary sector are skilled and equipped to do in the morning, and we're asking us just to be in the conversation of where are the vacancies, how do we help fill them. That's our ask.
Maybe asked in the committee, could you ask the Education Authority for those in terms of where those vacancies are, and then through the Planning Investment Forum we could start to look at how can we look at there could be, the answer is no, as I said to you before, or the answer could be yes, there is a voluntary sector provider there that could step into that role. And even in some roles where there's an acting up position, like I can speak from my own area in Derry at the minute, there's an area that has about 7 or 8 voluntary sector providers, one statutory provider in it, but EAF just went out and put out a senior worker for that area, and you're going, how does that wear up? There's 7 or 8 voluntary sector providers, why do you need a senior worker in that area to oversee? So there's no need, it just doesn't weigh up in terms of the service. So we need to get into a conversation around that and around how they're used.
Has EA corresponded with you around this?
You come back with some sort of thing around it, correct me if I'm wrong here folks, about, and we understand this as well, they have to look after their own workers, there's regulations within that, but we are trying to articulate this is not about a worker, this is about a vacant post, so there is no worker in this post, and we're looking at changing that. Just because it's always been a statutory deployment doesn't mean to say it has to stay as a statutory deployment and around that arena. And then that issue around due regard, so they only have to pay due regard to the partners within the area. That's why we have to make sure the Planning Investment Board would bring those discussions to the table, so that it can't just say the legislation only requires us to do it through due regard. there's actually an open dialogue around the needs and the service that's needed to meet the need of the young people in that area, and who's best placed to deliver it.
And just to follow on from the chair's question around the decrease in the bureaucracy, the second key ask, just if you can elaborate on that.
Yep, so I'm going to speak to that ask. So yeah, we're appealing that there's a reduction in the bureaucracy of the EA financial vouching process for the youth service funding. We acknowledge that the EA have taken some steps to improve the financial vouching process. However, the system can be simplified much further to allow for a less kind of less paperwork, a reduction in paperwork, a reduction in the stress that it's causing those local voluntary youth organisations, some who are part-time and voluntary, and it would also allow for an enhanced flexibility. One thing that's really important for us is that we are improving the efficiency and increasing the resources that are available to support children and young people. So we would ask that the EA consider a model that's used by the Department for the Economy for the ESF funding scheme, but also similar to the SEUPB programme. And that alternative approach is where they would allocate a set percentage on top of staff costs as a management fee. That management fee, or that specific percentage, would be unvouched. Because currently 100% of an award that's given to a local youth organisation is vouched. Every penny is vouched. And like this percentage fee, which would be unvouched, would be considered to cover all expenses such as programme and overhead costs. And we have received some feedback from the Education Authority on this, and they've said that this is a European model of funding, and we accept that. But this also exemplifies best practice, and we think that this European model should be explored further, and it could be explored if there was a planning and investment forum set up for us to have those conversations. I want to share an example to demonstrate some of the challenges that local organisations are facing when it comes to the 100% financial vouching process. We have two of our own members with Youth Action, one in the southern area and one in the Armagh area. For this year had to return £9,000 each of their award for disallowed expenditure whenever that vouching process was completed, and for them that can equate to almost 15% of their entire budget. So that's money that could have been allocated and spent for programme costs and overheads. At the minute, those organisations are out fundraising. There's parents, children and young people are out fundraising to repay that money back to the Education Authority. So part of our ask here is, where is the money, when that money is being repaid back, where does it go to? Is it retained within the statutory sector, or does it go to back into that local voluntary group the following year? Or how is it spent? And when we met with the Department of Education, and some of the questions were around what was the expenditure and why was it disallowed, and sometimes it's following the processes or the systems can be quite difficult, especially if it's a new spec for that organisation and they're not familiar with the systems and processes of the Education Authority. But it's also some costs have been allocated to upkeep in the building. So it can be, for example, in Kingdom Youth Club in Kilkeel, which is a rural area, pest control. It can be for the maintenance of fire extinguishers. It can be replacing windows that have been broke through usual like youth work activity. Things like that. The lifts not being maintained, and so they have been putting in funding for that there, and it's maybe not been disallowed because it didn't meet the terms and reference of the financial system. So through this, the new approach that it's not a new approach, it's a best practice approach that's been used by ESF and SEUPB. We believe that this model would allow a more responsive approach more responsive to the needs of the voluntary youth organisations, and it would allow more flexibility for them to allocate resources as and when seen fit. We also believe that it would allow organisations, local organisations, to provide a more innovative and responsive approach to supporting their children and young people. So I'm going to use Kingdom Youth Club again. An idea that they had was they're based in a rural area, and they noticed that there was a drop in service users, young people attending, because of the cost of going in and out of that centre, and they wanted to provide transport. They wanted to have a rambler to go in and collect the young people and bring them in safely and send them home safely. Now they wouldn't have been able to allocate or use their budget for that award for that year and use that for that approach. They had to go and look for that for somewhere, a different source of funding for that. So this type of approach, this new model, would allow a more flexible and more innovative approach. To us, it's common sense, but it's because we're the challenge is maintaining those systems and processes of the financial vouching system. It would also improve organisational resilience. We're not saying that this money is not going to be accountable and it's completely not vouched. We know that our organisations, our local members, have financial procurement processes, and all our financial books are audited many times a year. I know that Tony over there complains about his are open and accessible and are audited 4 times a year. And we would support our members to make sure that that's maintained. There's a high standard of accountability for spending. But lastly, we do believe that this would hugely reduce the administrative burden on not just the local voluntary organisation, but also on the Education Authority, because the time and the resources that's gone into vouching every single one of our members who are awarded an award is time consuming, and it's resources that could be reallocated back into the voluntary sector and directly impacting on children and young people.
We need to bring other members in at this stage, but there's plenty to follow up there. Just in the interest of time, I think, on this, and if we will maybe just try and keep the answers as focused as we can to make sure we get round everybody. Robbie, if you're in next.
You Danny would try and hog it. He's trying to use a ball shouldn't be in his time. He's trying to get his 7 minutes multiplied by 3. Doesn't work like that, Danny. Thank you very much. Really, really good. And I'm not singling anybody out, but Stephen, you've been on this for a while now, but what is remarkable is how you've pulled together and speaking with single voice, which is really good. And I remember the conversations in the last committee with the EA in and around these similar themes. And I think it's actually quite remarkable that you guys have held together post-COVID with all the pressures that came with the reduction in funding due to Brexit, obviously, and those pressures and stuff. I think your paper's brilliant, okay? So I'm not going to go too much into what you're offering, because I think they're really sound, practical ideas, especially in the manner that you pitch them. You're not after EA's jobs. There's a role for EA to do here, and they do perform very well. But I'm very aware of the issues that are faced. So we've got Resurgam Youth Initiative in Lisburn. We've got Logic Cafe, Logic in Moira. And I've sat with them both in terms of trying to negotiate the bureaucracy that you've spoken about and these layers of sort of the blockages actually to performance. But could you maybe do 2 or 3 things for me? One is to paint the impact of our young people if these services are lost or a delay in terms of the interventions with the young people. Also, could you tell me about the impact on staff and delivery and operations that this is having, and also if there are any issues with recruitment and retention of, because I can only imagine, I mean, there's events at the moment where we're talking about the community and voluntary sector in particular, and the real pressures post-COVID of attracting and retaining staff, and I think that's an imminent threat. And I think if we don't get a much more efficient service, that it could fall on its knees.
Do you want to?
I think it's a good question from yourself, Robbie and Danny. One thing I wanted to come back to just before I try to respond to that is, although the ESF and the SEUPB were designed in Europe, they're being implemented locally. So there's not a huge amount of reason why it can't actually be delivered in Northern Ireland either. And then there's a difference between vouched or unvouched and audited. We're all audited. We're audited 4 times a year, 3 by 3 different government departments, and then our own auditor. So we're clearly saying that we are welcome anybody to walk through the door and say, how is that receipt or how is that money spent as well. I think, let me take it back to your consistency, Robbie. We have a job in Lisburn, in Lisburn East. It's been advertised 3 times in the last 3 months. I can't get anybody to fill it. That's either got to do with the level of salary or the perks that come with the job, or the biggest one is it's only a 3-year post. I can't think beyond that. It's very difficult to even motivate people to come into that. And then we have other staff who are 1 year or 6 year or they're 6 months or they're seasonal workers. It's very difficult to kind of motivate and create and build team around that. So one of the things that Sheila was saying around just the kind of staff and delivery, if we can't replace a window, we can't deliver youth work in the hall. Or we have an obligation from the Education Authority to make sure there's health and safety requirements that we stick to. But if we can't replace the fire extinguisher that a 8, 9, 10-year-old wants to have a bit of fun with, a bit of crack, and has half emptied it, we can't deliver. So, and I mean, these things happen. They don't happen all the time, but they do happen. So we're trying to find a way and a system and a process to say, how can we change this? And what we're doing is, I think we're coming with a solution-focused kind of paper, saying we have ideas on how to actually fix some of this stuff. Transformation is one of the key words in this here. It's transformation of local youth services. We recognise the things that have done well in the past. We want to build on that, and we think we can do things even better and differently. The impact, £18,000 off local youth services, that is absolutely massive. Either that's summer schemes or it's day trips or seasonal workers or whatever it may be. Delivering on children and community youth services, it's not going to happen if we don't transform how we vouch and how we do our financial processes.
Can I just finish it out? And this will be the last one because I appreciate your answers. There's also the one of the things that's not talked about enough, and I see Resurgam Youth doing it in particular, is the shared initiatives. So in terms of the product and what is actually happening, it's not just the evenings, and Stephen said, some clubs will operate on a Saturday or Sunday or 1 or 2 evenings, but there's extended work that happens too that isn't. Is it captured well enough, do you think, in terms of the impact that has, where young people from very diverse backgrounds are getting to spend time together? And is there more that we can do in that sphere?
You could release the T-Buck money that needs to happen in the summer.
If I could.
No one heard that one.
I say that with a kind of a joke and a jive as well, but I mean the T-Buck money's together building united communities, and they're bringing across all sections of the community. So for our own organisation, we're working in Inner East Belfast, we're working in Lisburn, we're in Gallia and Derry, Waterside and Derry, and that's what helps bring us all together. So I think the release of that and just the kind of holding that is very difficult at the minute. So, but we, like lots of our organisations, particularly with our own, we have a good relations member of staff, who is a Protestant married to a Catholic, and I can take you through generations like that. So we're crossing the divide. We're bringing people from West Belfast, Turnbrook, Lagmore, Poglass across to Pitt Park, and Pitt Park is a hive of activity at the moment. So we're not afraid to do that, and all of our organisations do it. I'm sure you guys are part of organisations yourself that are doing the exact same thing. So the impact on that, relationships, the community building, the releasing of community tensions is, I don't know how you can put a value on it.
I just think I know what happens and I see it, but I just don't think we celebrate it enough. Because we hear the usual give the bad stuff. So if young people sadly are sucked into doing something bad, but how many events are happening that are stopping young people from going there? So thank you for.
We actually did a bit of research on that, Robbie, 2 years ago, and it came out that voluntary sector organisations were underreporting because they don't have the time. If you're going to sit down and adequately capture every single thing that you're doing, it takes a lot of time, and workers in charge, or leaders in charge, and youth workers in charge, they're having to occupy 2-3 roles, maybe 4 or 5 roles. They're having to look after the maintenance of the building, they're having to be the youth worker, they're having to do the finance, they're having to take all these different hats on depending on what time of day it is. And the actual time to get down to youth work is very difficult. So decreasing that bureaucracy would allow greater time to be able to capture more impact. And it would almost be, it would work out a benefit there, an unexpected benefit, I suppose. But you also talked about recruitment and retention of staff.
That's very briefly to finish here on this one, Michal. Yeah. No, don't finish your point, that's fine. Just very briefly.
You do what Tony does. The next person asks a question, just answer mine first of all. It's another wee tip for you.
This is a great committee.
But that's our biggest challenge. And the reason being is, I can speak from my own organisation as well as a regional. You know, we can only offer fixed term contracts a lot of the time, 1 year at a time. You know, that person's living year by year not knowing whether they can take on a financial commitment of a mortgage. They can't get a mortgage. You know, so if you're a young person sitting down thinking, where do I want to go? I want to have a family. You know, I want to do this. I have aspirations to do that. You can't plan a year ahead. You know, you're not eligible for any of these things, these milestones that people are trying to get in life. You know, so it becomes a massive challenge, and following a passion becomes even more difficult. And even the likes of like salary increments, like that doesn't happen in the voluntary sector. You're froze for maybe 4 or 5 years, and if inflation goes up by 16%, you're just that's just what you have to live with, and you have to just accept that. You know, so the likes of what we were saying at the start, which is about ring fencing investment to the voluntary sector. If we had an annual increment in that every year, which is, say it was 25%, I'm just off the top of my head, it was 25% of the Department for Education's budget and youth work went to that, but every year there was a proposal of 1.5% or 2% of an increment, at least of an salaries. And that, again, that comes from best practice from SAUPB, who do actually ask you to factor that in. So yes, there are huge changes, but there's solutions to these changes, and we are being proactive, and a plan and investment forum would be able to tackle them on a strategic level.
Mr. Chairman, we do have some requests for you.
Yeah, I
as a
understand
committee.
that. Yeah, in terms of follow-up asks, I'm conscious I want to bring other members in, and I'll give you the chance to make sure we know our asks at the end of the session, just because maybe just to make sure we keep answers short and focused, or we're not going to have time to get round everybody, because I think everyone else going to want to come in. So I'll bring Kate in now for the next question.
Okay. Thank you. This is fascinating, and you have such good energy, and I love that you've come with solutions to this. And I guess I'd be interested in what your asks are. The 2 kind of points, well, maybe 3 points I wanted to pick up and take what you want. What's worked well about your consortium, and what support have you had? And I guess kind of the strategic aims within that, and how you would bring that to a planning and investment forum. What sort of cross-departmental work is happening? And I was really interested in what I was going to ask about the workforce, but you've touched on that, and the recruitment and retention. I think those are things when we're dealing with economy, and that they're good points for us. And then anything else
if I do worked well, and then John came out across department. I was like, work well. The 600 groups in our network is the knowledge that's not being tapped into strategically. Where John's saying there's a vacancy, there's an opportunity for change, you need to know who to ask. Sometimes it's a knowledge set. You can't underestimate the amount of phone calls we get from local members saying, this is a problem, this is an issue. It is massive, it's huge. And that knowledge doesn't have a place strategically to say, we know a group that's in Castlewellan that can do X, Y, and Z, or we know a group in Limavady that can do X, Y, or Z. We are that knowledge source. I think that is, and what's been really important in that is, it's still going to be competitive, because there might be 2 or 3 of those local groups in those places. That's life. We're going to have to accept that. But at least, as John said, there's a chance for a change whenever you've got a vacancy. Cross department, John, do you want to?
There's a number of roles. Effectively, the youth service works probably with every department across it, but particularly within the voluntary community sector, we don't get the acknowledgement in terms there. But primarily, we are talking about the Department for Justice, particularly through their tackling paramilitarism programme, and through the stuff around community safety in terms of where we operate with street-based youth work and the arenas around that. And then we're also talking around the Department of Health and how we work within the Department of Health. Micheál will give experience in terms of his health and wellbeing framework and the work that he's doing within around that. So we also talk about how do we have a public health approach to youth work, and a peripatetic approach where we go and meet young people where they're at, in a place where they're at, and to ensure their safety and stability, and work in a multi-agency cross-departmental way in terms of where we're going. The challenge that we face within that is that in certain areas we were there a number of years ago, but it seems to have gone off the radar of the Education Authority in terms of that's the way we should be working, that's the way we should be going.
Just to interrupt, I asked a question about that, the kind of policy move away from the detached youth work, and they said that wasn't something they were doing, but everyone who works in youth work says that they are.
Because it's not detached youth work, it's alright.
Go into the detail, that's the question I wanted to ask.
I think that's not a short answer, Nick, so you better.
That's a whole whole day, Nick. We did a whole day of street-based youth work and what it is. It's all right.
We had written to the EA on that point, and I think still waiting for the response around that policy question. So again, I think that's one.
You
just
are
to
right.
note that is
They
outstanding.
do say that we do fund detached youth work. Look, outreach and detached youth work is fundamental core methodology to support core youth work. It's what we do. It's a bit like Sheila talked about when she gave the example. When the young people aren't coming to our centre, how do we go and get them in terms of where we go? But street-based youth work is completely different in that arena. It's an enhanced version of detached youth work where we take a peripatetic approach to safeguarding children and young people. That's what we do in that arena. That requires a multi-agency, multi-government department response in terms of how we go out and then do it. And there's a role with the Education Authority to fund that. You know, if we go back to last year, they funded 16 specifications across the region for street-based youth work. 13 of them were filled. This year they didn't do it at all. This year they said that they allowed the organisation to choose the methodology of delivery, but that completely disregards the role that street-based youth work plays in the safety and stability of children and young people. So we have to get to a way of doing it, and we have a way that we're trying to work with that with the department to try and say, actually, this is every government's department's responsibility because it affects every government department. And myself and Tony are working on it in terms of a conference and trying to bring people together to explore that. We have people registering from Dublin, from England, looking to be part of it because social unrest just doesn't exist in the context of the North. It exists worldwide, and youth work has a role in that. And how do we use that role?
And just to bring that there, and that's why we're asking for a local planning and investment
Yep,
forum, because
100%.
that decision shouldn't be made unilaterally. It should be made
And that
collectively.
planning and investment board.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to add?
No, they're very
Yeah.
persuasive.
Maybe just note for the minutes that I don't know how you record the hilarity that was came from Tony's answer to the question around the teapot buddies, but we'll
Great to put in the minutes.
we'll find a way to communicate that.
One of the things I want to come back on the Kate is, I mean, this is quite unique where you have 6 organisations who are unified, who have spent the last 6 months picking holes a year,
18 months.
picking holes in each other's arguments around you think this, we think that,
Yeah.
and we've come to a consensus where we're interested and passionate about community youth work and young people, and that's where we come from first. We've had to set aside a huge amount of difference, a huge amount of opinion, a huge amount of you're going to go there, we'll not go there, and it's working really well. It's working really well.
I think Cara had wanted to come in online. Can you hear okay, Karen, or good to go ahead there?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, spot on, thank you.
I'm just going to see if my camera should be working. There we go. Folks, thank you so much. I had missed the first part there due to some broadcasting issues, but it's been good to hear some of the giggles going along the way. I have 2 questions. The first one is just based around, I really enjoyed the conversation there about reconciliation and celebrating our young people when they do good as opposed to just highlighting when they do bad. What more do you think we can do to promote reconciliation in youth work? And then my next question is just around, I'm based in the Northwest, taking in, the East Derry constituency, but also I'm mindful Derry, Strabane, Omagh. I just want to know, is there any particular issues there? I know recently Claudy opened its youth club and there was some challenges with staff recruitment and retention, which has already been mentioned. But those are just 2 of the things. And just to thank you for being here today and thank you for the work that you do, because our young people are so desperately in need of a place where they can be themselves. And it is through youth work that they can be. So thank you for the work that you do.
Only for a short one.
I think it's a really good question, Cara. I think it's a difficult one to answer just kind of straight away. I mean, reconciliation kind of goes across a number of generations, not just young people. But I think youth provision does it really well. They provide spaces where young people can be honest, they can be transparent, they can walk in their various different football, rugby tops and feel comfortable in that space, but also explore why are they walking in like that. So one of the things that I thought of was around how do we actually allow young people to tell their story. And I think stories is immense in terms of Northern Ireland. How they grew up, where they came from, here's their family background, but share stories in a very safe space is absolutely crucial. And I think we can do that, but I think we also need a strategic approach to that. And that's what we're talking about this plan and investment forum. How do we do that strategically with all the bodies together, talking about how do you hear the voice of young people, how do you bring our communities together in Northern Ireland, and there's definitely a way to do that.
Tony, can I come in on that just for Cara as well? As much as it's really important to deliver work, peace and reconciliation work, and bring it to the lives of young people, it's also really important that volunteers and staff are also accessing peace building training and learning how to negotiate and how to deliver programmes around that type of topic, but also looking at their own historical issues as well, because we're all have been affected by the troubles in living in Northern Ireland. So it's really important that we look at not just the young people, but we look at the organisation as a whole in terms of what their policies are around providing an inclusive and welcome environment, but also the capacity of staff and volunteers to get involved in delivering like CRED-based work or peace and reconciliation-based work. It's really important.
And just a wee bit, they've finished now, Karen, and it's coming on to your point, Kate, about the cross-departmental stuff. You know, there's a very clear role. Every government department has a strategy and key points in which they must contribute to good relations and community relations and all. How do we get them all working together? How do we bring in all of those strategies connected together so that we're not duplicating what we're trying to do, that we're not asking schools to do something that youth services do or youth service to do something that other agencies are doing? How is that a whole community approach to actually addressing the issue of reconciliation within the context of the North?
Yeah, I think Cara had a question specifically on the Northwest and your constituency. Do you need Cara just to repeat that question?
Could
yeah,
I
and
say
then
it
we'll
again?
finish up. It would need to be quite brief in the
Yeah.
answer.
No worries. No, listen, thank you so much. That was a really detailed answer. And I just noted my own experience. I had went to a Catholic primary, a Catholic secondary, and it was the Portrush Youth Club, and that I used to attend. You got the chance to mingle with everyone and be friends with everybody, all backgrounds and beliefs. And their staff were mixed as well. And it was a really good opportunity as a young person to kind of shape and mold understandings of different upbringings as well. And I went back recently to the youth club there, and they have lots of newcomer children, children from Ukraine, Afghanistan. It's been really interesting to see the work of youth provision does in that aspect. Yes, just to nail down then this final question, I'm the only representative from the Northwest on the Education Committee, and I'm just curious about, do you feel the Northwest needs more investment? And I recognise, particularly in rural areas, it can be difficult to secure staff. Because I had a few months ago now, I had been to the New Claudia Youth Club and had noted they had challenges with staff there. So is that something you're seeing, particularly if it's in a rural area, it's more challenging to get staff out to it?
If I
Yeah,
could,
there's-
if one member could just of the panel could take the response and
And I'm from the
take
Northwest, I'll do it.
Yeah.
Sorry, you know, no pressure on that.
I assumed you would.
Cara, yeah, you're 100% right. Look, there's multi-layered in that. There is the reality, the rurality in terms of the complexities around the investment in reality. And I know that I met with the Rural Planning Board prior to the release of the funding that came out, and there was a lot of misconceptions around that, around what was being invested into that area. And when we looked at that, we're actually looking at that and going, there's actually a massive under-investment in the rural area, but there's also a heavy reliance in the statutory service to deliver in that area. And that's where, particularly in the Northwest, we're seeing a lot of the vacancies that don't exist. The jobs aren't filled within there, and there's a lot of moving around going on within it. But the Northwest as a whole has historically been underfunded in terms of where they go. The investment into there has historically been there, and you know we were making strides to sort of moving that and moving towards it. But that seemed to have stopped, and it seemed to be, well, there's too much of an allocation now coming into that particular area, and we need to look at where it is. I would argue that there's a lot of resource there, it's just not used in the right way. And if it was used through the planning and investment forum, then we could make more strategic decisions to actually how do we deploy that youth work money to reach every child or young person right across that area.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. It's very detailed, and I think we can take this a little further as a committee as well. So thank you very much for your answers.
Thank you, Cara. I'm going to bring Cheryl in, and I think I just would like to give you all the opportunity just to clarify your asks at the end. Tony, I know I didn't mean to cut you off on that earlier, but it was just to make sure we know exactly how you're asking us to follow up. But Cheryl, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much for everything so far, and it's great to see everybody working together collaboratively. I know that I'm seeing so much collaborative work now locally because they've had to do it basically, and working together, so it's so positive to see. But just in terms of provision, I take it as a collective, have you mapped out the provision across Northern Ireland, and are you seeing anywhere particular worrying gaps where there isn't the youth provision that there should be, or is there particular areas where you're finding a significant barrier for youth provision?
I do the first part of that, John. We have mapped it. The problem is, it's nowhere to go. We've nowhere to bring it to. We don't have a forum that can have the conversation. That's the only thing I want to say. That's a quick answer, Nick. There you go.
I think that makes your case, doesn't it? Yeah.
John?
And just to add to that, it's also not clear sometimes where the investment is. It's not clear how it's invested in and what is the outcome, the intended outcome of it. So it's trying to work our way through actually what is the actual allocation within that area. What is it actually being funded to do? How is it being funded? And then what's the expectations from that? So it's trying to get into the nitty gritty of that as well. Actually understanding how the allocations are made, where they go, and how can we best use those. Slightly different, but we just can't get into that arena. There's no arena to have that open and honest conversation.
And that's the frustrating bit.
And that's the frustrating bit.
But also to identify those vacancies as well, because by identifying the vacancies, then we can identify the gaps in provision for that there should be provision there for community and voluntary sector.
And in terms of, even as you say, the provision, I know within my own constituency of East Antrim, the Monkstown area, there has been 2 posts that have been advertised now for 3 years, which they can't get filled. There's people there in the voluntary and community sector that are more than able to do these roles, and they can't, they're not allowed to apply for it. So there's a change there in recognising that policy provision, but it's a huge issue.
So I talked to the boxing club yesterday just in preparation for coming here today, and they wanted me to make sure you knew that. So you did the job for me, so I do appreciate that. So yeah, but to be fair to EA, how do they make that change? There is no architecture to that EA did make them have to think that way, so they just replace the post. That's a natural cycle, and that's what we need help with.
Yeah, and it's having that collective voice and knowing exactly what direction that we all need to go to make those changes and make sure we're doing it for the right of the young people. So.
And I think it's important to ask as well that if those posts are vacant and have been lying vacant for a while, where's the money going that should have been allocated, to the children and young people in that area? What's happened to that, and where does it go?
That money through the system isn't always easy.
And there's a common sense approach there, because there's obviously vacant positions, there's people not getting the service that they need, there's money sitting there, why is it not being done? So
there's other organisations out there other than ourselves that could occupy them roles if we couldn't. The likes of Forum Logue, the Irish Media, really great organisation, could do really great work, and they could definitely step into positions if needed. So it's and when they can. So everyone has to be involved in this planning and investment forum, not just us. It's a representative thing of the sector.
Yeah. But just very quickly, just in terms of the methods of best practice, the likes of Monkstown or the YMCA in Carrickfergus, Mosheer, unbelievable what they do, and to see what they have actually achieved and replicate that elsewhere. I know I'm biased, I'm sure throughout Northern Ireland there's plenty of examples, but incredible work what they do. So I think it's really important that can be shared amongst that space.
And all we're asking is take away the fragility. But it's not EA's job, to be honest. I believe it sits with the Minister and you guys to make that recommendation. We're only going to operationalise what you tell us, and that's where we're at the minute. And it's a big ask here today. A planning and investment forum is a massive ask, but it's a bit we're asking for it so quick. We feel like there's a pace on this, and we're sorry about that, but we can't wait 4 years to the policy cycle, or 3 years till it comes to conclusion. We need something now to have these forums.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Look, I appreciate there's maybe that's maybe an important point to finish on with Stephen. I'll just hand over for you guys to clarify your asks, so we can take that forward. It's been a wee bit of levity today, but this is a big ask, and it is really critical that we get this right for the sector. So I think the committee is well aware of that, and we understand the significance of what you're proposing today. So I think I'll just hand over, and we're clear on the local youth services planning and investment forum, the reduction in bureaucracy, that mapping of vacancies, and a shift to that funding of that more your ESF style model where there's a percentage put on top of your staff costs. Is there anything else, when we will certainly take those away, is there anything else that you want to add just to make sure we're communicating and understand properly what you're bringing to the table today?
you'd been in this side of the table, that's pretty much I
That's exactly what.
content with that, Nick.
Did somebody give you this piece of paper? Did you read this?
I've just been taking copious notes here. And I read my
Turning out to be a
papers.
good chair. We were concerned at the start of this. But he's all right. He's fine.
I haven't used the bell yet.
There's probably one thing just to conclude. Like, we are only charities. We are charities. You know, that's our job. We're not responsible for the strategic structure and the architecture of the youth services, but we know we don't have one yet to have a place to make that change. So, and it's not EA's job to do this. It's not. Their job is to operationalise what they're told. DE need a bit of vision about where, but I think they need permission to know, is this the direction you want us to go? And I think the Minister and yourselves have a tremendous opportunity. This will not last. You know, not that we don't fall out each other, but we could change jobs or move. Who knows? Yeah. This is a window. It definitely is a window.
You're making a sort of equivalence between us and the Minister.
Sorry.
This is the Minister here.
You can help us. You can help us.
It would be great if we could just make those kind of decisions. Doesn't quite work that way. Look, that's brilliant. Look, thank you so much for your time. That's been
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much brilliant presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
In touch with you about Lisburn.
Okay, so while we're making, because we're still in. Can I just remind members we're still in open session here? So while the witnesses are making their way out, I think we should just clarify. Robbie, excuse me, we're still in open session. If we can grab a seat. So if we can make some agreements now around the follow-up actions. So I think we had agreement in the summary that I put to the panel there that those were the actions. I would suggest maybe adding to that. I think it was clear that perhaps there is a division between EA and department, and the EA, as I think rightly they have highlighted, will operationalise what the department tells them to deliver. So perhaps our first engagement does need to be with DE around those asks and for their assessment. And I think we should certainly factor into forward work planning, you know, perhaps to hear from the department in relation to their assessment of the collective's proposals. Is there anything anybody else wants to add to that? Is that a fair summary of where we've landed with that presentation?
Sure. I think it's spot on. I was actually so glad that Kate asked that question, because what I was talking about in the last couple of weeks was actually the West Belfast attached. They want to get parochial today, but the answer to that, that's the difference when you get the answer saying there is. It's part, then they tell you very clearly that it's not there.
And I think we talk a lot about collaboration in this committee, and we had a really good example of that in front of us today. So I think that's the really welcome presentation. So that's great. Okay, so look, I'll just take a steer from members. If anybody feels we need to take a short comfort break before our next witnesses, we can, or we can move on. So I'm content to move on.
I need to go to the loo.
Yeah, that's fine. That's what a comfort break is, Robert. Yeah.
Strike that for the minutes.
It's a euphemism, but
what are we going to
what
do
it is,
if you get elected next week?
Great. We can move into closed session then.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
I don't vote because I stopped the bill and had aye, but that's a one. Didn't win.
Okay, members, so that is us back in public session, and that moves us on to item 7 on the agenda, and that is, if you want to bring the witnesses through, yes please, that's a briefing from the Education and Training Inspectorate, and I would refer members to the briefing from the committee clerk at page 102 and the ETI briefing paper at page 104. So while we just get the witnesses in and settled, and then we will take it from there. Okay, I'll just let everybody get to their seats and then we'll do introductions. Okay, so you're all very welcome here at the Education Committee this afternoon. It's good to have you here. And I'll just run through the names that I have here as attending, but if any of you want to do any further introductions when it comes to your presentation, please feel free. So we have Festina Graham, the Chief Inspector from ETI, Nicola Byrne, Assistant Chief Inspector, Sinead McKenna, Acting Assistant Chief Inspector, Cathy Galway, Director of Policy, Planning, Organisational Development and Youth Education and Training Inspectorate. That is not a short job title. And Elaine McAllister, the Managing Inspector for ETI. So you're all very welcome, and we know that you are at a point of really launching quite a significant change in how inspection is going to be delivered in Northern Ireland. So the committee really is very keen to hear from you, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions across a range of issues. But at this stage, I will hand over for initial remarks or opening presentation, and that can be up to 10 minutes, and then we will move to question and answer. I'm just always mindful when we have a large panel, and I think we had that with the last evidence session, it can be difficult to get through things in a timely fashion if everybody answers every question. So I just ask to maybe just keep it focused to maybe one or two panel members for each question, and we tend to look at sort of 5 minutes per inquiry from each member. That's really just to make sure everybody does have the opportunity to come in and engage. I will do my best to stick to that. But over to you for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for the opportunity to brief you on the role, function and purpose of inspection in education. Also to provide some further detail on the development of our new inspection framework, and to cover our thematic reports as you requested on physical education in the primary sector and the preventative curriculum, more specifically the relationship and sexuality education aspects of that particular report. I hope that the written briefing was helpful in providing a backdrop to all of that work, and I'll just touch briefly on each of those elements. So the functions of the Education and Training Inspectorate are set out in the Education and Libraries Northern Ireland Order 1986, specifically Article 102, and I just wanted to say that we operate very much in line with our statutory duties. The briefing paper outlined the wide range of areas we inspect, which include and go beyond the statutory education sector itself. And I suppose in terms of our distinct contribution to education, we are a unitary inspectorate, which provides an independent and evidence-based inspection and policy advice service, in particular to the Department of Education, of which we are also a part, and to the Department for the Economy. We do also accept commissioned work from other departments, so for example DAERA in relation to the inspection of the College of Agriculture, Food and Rural Enterprise, CAFRE. We also have agreements in place with Criminal Justice Inspection and the Regulation and Quality Improvement Authority in terms of joint working and inspection, cooperation with those inspectorates and also information sharing. And we do that essentially through memoranda of understanding and service level agreements with all of those organisations. Essentially, inspection serves 3 main purposes: public accountability, improvement at individual organisation and also at system level in relation to raising standards, and finally collecting first-hand evidence which can then be used to inform education policy. In high autonomy education systems, of which this would be recognised to be one, A strong inspectorate is how government gets the assurance that all is well within the system as a whole, how it knows to intervene if necessary, and where policy is either working effectively or needs modified in light of experience. And when I became Chief Inspector in September 2020, I did so with a clear remit to both review inspection and also to reset professional working relationships, and to do those things to ensure that optimum benefit would be gained from marrying self-evaluation by organisations with the external evaluation that comes then through inspection. And as always, putting our learners at the centre, we developed our vision, which is to be the voice for equity and excellence for all learners. We made commitments publicly through our Stepping Up and Stepping Forward publication to empower improvement through facilitating professional dialogue right across education sectors, and also by identifying, reporting on and disseminating innovative practice from which others could learn. And those commitments very much remain. In setting out then to transform the inspection process, we consulted initially with all stakeholders on what they saw to be both the function and the purpose of inspection. Reassuringly, there was agreement that all of us who are responsible for delivering public services and spending public money must be accountable. The issue for organisations in receipt of inspection services was that they wanted assurances from us that the accountability process would be fair, objective and transparent, and rightly so. In turning to purpose, then, we set about defining and agreeing a purpose that would lead to organisations feeling confident, in other words, being empowered, to handle the process of inspection in a robust, professional, but ultimately a beneficial for them way, by seeing it as complementary to the ongoing process of improvement in their own organisation and as a catalyst to further improvement, rather than seeing it as an event to be managed, endured or overcome, or indeed just another piece of the bureaucratic burden. The consensus we reached with all of our stakeholders is that the purpose of all inspection activity is therefore to contribute to building capacity within the organisations inspected, and to enable them to provide high quality education and outcomes for all of their learners. And having established those parameters, many schools and also our Northern Ireland Teacher Council colleagues, despite the fact that we had action short of strike, have engaged enthusiastically in co-design work around the development of the new inspection models. We couldn't have done that work without their participation, and we remain very much grateful for that cooperation. The development, the trialling and implementation of the new inspection model has to date been very well received, and a number of pilot inspection reports have already been published. I have also published recently an update on the Education and Training Inspectorate website, which goes into detail on the new approach and provides indicators of effective practice. Inspectors have also been delivering what are called empowering improvement workshops, and in the current term we've delivered those to around 300 leaders, and we will continue to engage with the education and training sectors on the new model to ensure that schools, organisations, settings and indeed our youth clubs understand the new approach and can engage with it positively and constructively. The key change to inspection is that we are using 5 questions for consideration as the core of all inspections, whatever the sector. And those questions focus on what the school or organisation wants to achieve for its learners, in other words, the organisation's vision, and the challenges it faces in doing so. How it monitors how well it is actually doing that, how it celebrates and embeds success, and how ultimately it creates a community of learning. We have included these as well as the 9 contributory areas in the written update that we provided. Despite action short of strike over a sustained period, individual organisation has continued across the phases of early years, work-based learning, further education, youth, and education within our prison system. We are the only jurisdiction which has always retained a district inspector network, and that network really is where individual inspectors are allocated to each of our organisations and retain an ongoing link. That has continued across all phases and is one of the most valued aspects of our work. We continue to involve practising senior leaders in the inspection process through our Associate Assessor programme. So, for example, Associate Assessors with specialisms in PE provided a number of the visits that would have contributed to the PE thematic survey that you have under consideration today. And then turning to those thematic evaluations, I don't plan to go into any detail on those in these opening remarks, other than to highlight that in the physical education report, while there is evidence of good practice, there is still more that needs to be done to ensure that children are benefiting from their statutory entitlement to physical education, not just in terms of hours of activity, but also the quality of education that is on offer. Likewise, we have highlighted the actions needed to ensure that children are receiving a high-quality curriculum offer for relationships and sexuality education, particularly one that reflects the contemporary issues facing children and young people and equips them with the knowledge and skills to be able to take informed decisions as they move to become young adults. These thematic evaluations, and being strongly evidence-based, allow us to advocate for the changes teachers and their pupils and parents want to see in these areas. Equally, rather than make a series of recommendations and leave it at that, we have tried to make some practical suggestions for next steps to move practice forward in both of these areas. We all know that these are very challenging times in education. We hope that by working collaboratively with a range of stakeholders and organisations, the service we provide will support our colleagues who work directly with learners day and daily to, in turn, enable more and more young people to succeed. As the strapline for our inspection framework says, lowering the stakes but raising the impact. Thank you. And we're happy at this point to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your written briefing and for that the presentation. It gives us a bit of a summary of that. I would just want to start by really just making comment in terms of the engagement that I have had with school leaders on this process, that it has been really positive. And I think, school leaders and educators, rightly are very, very quick to tell you when things are not working in the system, and they will raise that flag, and that is absolutely what we would expect them to do. But in terms of this process, certainly the feedback I've had is that it has been positive, and that they have found the engagement to be helpful, and that there definitely seems to be a willingness to work with the new process. So I just want to put that on record. We don't often always sort of recognise, when things go well, and when engagement and consultation is effective. So I just think it's important that we put that on record.
Lovely to hear. Thank you very much.
I think just leading on from that, would you be able to give us a little bit more of an assessment of what the response from those schools who've been involved in the pilot aspect of this, in terms of how they have their feedback from the process and how it was for them?
Okay, so over the last term, with the cessation of Action Short of Strike, we've been able to conduct a number of pilots. And those pilots have gone through the process of self-nomination, where schools actually volunteered to take part in the pilot. The previous period, and hopefully that's where you would have received some of that feedback from a lot of our schools, engaged in elements really of what the new inspection process was going to be. But again, we would really like to put our appreciation on record too for schools in the final term of the year, which is always the most difficult term, to actually volunteer to work with us, and we really very much appreciated that. So we've conducted 6 of those pilot inspections in the school sector, some in primary, and 2 in post-primary, and the remainder in the primary sector. We also completed around 25 follow-up inspections in schools, which was really coming from the previous process of inspection. But what we tried to do was to marry some of the old approaches with new approaches to, again, allow schools to get a sense of what we were doing and receive that feedback. So I'll hand over just for a moment to Elaine to talk about some of the specifics of the inspections. She has participated in those as our Managing Inspector for Primary and as the person who leads up that work. So Elaine, if you'd just like to give a little bit of detail on that.
Yeah, certainly. We've had an awful lot of very positive feedback. The sort of things we've been hearing are that people are feeling empowered, that they are having professional dialogue for the first time in a long time, and it is a dialogue, and that they feel that there is respect from both sides. Very much the teachers, when we were going out, were very, very on edge. Teachers were highly stressed by the idea of somebody coming out into the classrooms again, because it has been such a prolonged period of time from even within their own school where they haven't had anyone coming in to observe. So they felt that was quite high stakes, but we, as part of our inspection process now, have a joint planning day when we go into the school ahead of the inspection to work with the principal, to look at the sort of evidence that the school has that they're going to present with us, to talk about it, to plan out how the inspection will be, to really find out from them their key priorities and how they're going to demonstrate to us the work that's going on in school, and most importantly the impact that they are having and how that is really benefiting the children. So we have had great feedback on that's been a very beneficial day, and a key part of that day too is at the end of the day meeting with the staff along with the principal and talking to them about what the actual engagement in their rooms will be like, how we'll talk to them afterwards, and encouraging them to be reflective practitioners and tell us in the lesson, where did the learning go well, where are you going to take this learning to next, what maybe didn't go as well, which learners didn't get it, which learners did. And if we can walk out of that room knowing that that teacher knows where to go next with their teaching and knows what they're doing with their class, then we're happy, because we all know not every lesson, we've all been teachers, not every lesson goes perfectly. But if you know what didn't go well and you know what your next step is to fix that. So that has been very warmly received as well everyone that we have been in, including our follow-up inspections, we have had principals writing into us, giving us very positive feedback of that.
And just to add to that, to say that the process continues to be a robust inspection process, and what was heartening to hear was also where things didn't go just as well as maybe people had hoped. They were very much receptive and were able to take on board the type of things that the inspectors were feeding back. So I think we want to ensure that there is that balance, also that improvements can be affected subsequently. So far, so good, but clearly we still have more work to do.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to pick up then, and it's been referenced in a number of the comments you've made just in relation to action short of strike, and again some of the nervousness that there might be in the system in terms of someone back in the classroom observing what you're doing, or scrutinising things in a bit more detail. Have you got any sense of the sort of key challenges that you see in terms of managing that? We may have quite a lot of teachers in the workforce now who've never been through an inspection process, never been observed by their principal or anyone from senior leadership in school. Do you have any thoughts around how that can be best managed to strike that balance between a robust process that the public can have confidence in, on that accountability piece that you referenced there, and in terms of the evidence base that is required for taking policy forward, but also to ensure that schools don't feel it's a threatening process and it's something they can actually put their best foot forward and showcase what their school can do?
Yes, and I think one of the things I would say in response to that, Chair, is that is why we have invested so much time in really engaging with the system. During COVID itself, we conducted a programme called Empowering Improvement, in which we worked with around 1,200 middle leaders, and exactly what you're describing is what we found. So it was an online course that was run over a substantial period of time, and many of the middle leaders had come into the situation of being middle leaders during COVID and found that extremely difficult. So on the basis of that, and on the basis that we continue to work with those people through clustering with our district inspectors subsequently, we then designed what I described in my opening remarks as Empowering Improvement, but we call it Empowering Improvement 2. And those 300 leaders that we've worked with over this term alone, what we've done with is spend around 4 weeks, which we are going to extend to 6 weeks in the upcoming period of time, around 4 weeks after school, online again for an hour and a half, working right through the process, so that leaders will feel that they truly understand that process, and that talking then to their own staff, that they can actually ensure that is conveyed. Equally, I think one of the things that schools will probably still tell you is that we didn't go away in any shape or form over that period of time, but I would say that in a constructive way around the role of our district inspector, and I would like to think that you have heard positive feedback about that very long tradition of having a district inspector. So our district inspectors have still been in schools talking to principals and really trying to ascertain where those sensitivities exist. So one of the key things about the current approach is that request from all organisations that we really look very much at the unique context of each organisation. As Elaine said, the pre-inspection planning day, the inspector who will be leading the inspection will spend the day in the school, will talk to everyone on the staff, and there is something about that when people see your face and see you're a normal person in that particular situation, that you start to lower those levels of anxiety. But as Elaine said, we've also all been teachers. We know what it feels like to have someone else in your class, and what we're trying to do at the moment is shift the observation piece away from a focus on any kind of performance, if you want to call it that, of teaching, but to really focus, as Elaine said, on what have the children learned and how was learning facilitated. And that becomes a dialogue and a professional discussion that we feel will actually help the school to move forward subsequently. So I hope that does answer the question.
That is helpful. And I have just one final question, and it's specifically in relation to the engagement in the inspection process with the children and young people in the classroom. You referenced we have a system with a high level of autonomy, and this comes up time and time again in committee of, we might put forward any number of proposals or ideas, but ultimately schools have a huge degree of independence as to whether they implement that and how they implement departmental policy as well. Pupils and young people in particular really refer back to us that on the areas that matter to them, you've already highlighted RSE. We've looked at other issues in terms of the broader learning for life and work piece. Careers advice is another one, where the sense is that it's just very patchy provision, that some schools are delivering it in a way that really is meeting young people where they're at, and they come away very positively from that, and others saying, we actually didn't even know through our school career that we'd had that bit of the curriculum, even because it was maybe dealt with in such a light touch way. How does the inspection process engage with young people to really try and drill down into are those bits of the curriculum, I'm not talking here about delivering qualifications and exam results, but those bits that are preparing young people for life, that it's meeting them where they're at and meeting their needs?
I think it's fair to say we've always done that, but I'll ask Nicola to come in on some of the specifics around how we're engaging with young people in the revised process, because we do think that's really important that we extend that beyond what we've done previously. I hope that you did see within the RSE report that we did try to use innovative ways of actually engaging with young people. We had 14,500 young people respond to that particular report. And one of the ways we tried to do something different was by putting those user-friendly responses back to them. And again, Nicola was talking about an event she was at last night, just where, again, seeing schools and young people actually using what we said was good practice and seeing that in a very positive way subsequently. But we have nevertheless still thought about how we engage even more with young people. What I would say at times is absolutely it is patchy sometimes in terms of those various complex issues you've described. What I always find reassuring, I have to say, is that even the young people you engage with, there is something about our education system which empowers them to feel that they can have their say. They are very articulate when they come to talk to you, and they're not frightened to speak up. And I think that in itself is an indication of the successful aspects of our actual education system, when young people feel, yes, they may be protesting about something, but they do so in such an informed and in such a mature way. So I'll let Nicola fill you in on some of the actual inspection details, but just to put it in that context.
Well, one of the things I would say is that we needed to hear their voice in terms of how they could engage with inspection so that we could get their voice. So one of the first things that we did whenever we were looking at the new model of inspection was we had focus groups with the children and young people to hear how they wanted to engage with us, and also talk to senior leaders about how they engaged and got the voice of their learners in their organisations. And that helped us whenever it came to developing strategies for us to harness their voice through inspection. So in our inspections in primary and post-primary, we have questionnaires that go out prior to inspection, and we get significant numbers of responses to those questionnaires, and that gives us a lens to look through before we even go into the school building.
And it's important for us to look at those views and the views of the parents to get a feel for where things are at within an organisation. But when we're in schools, then a key element, and probably the most enjoyable element of our work, is talking with the children and young people and hearing their views on what is helping them to learn and how much do they enjoy their school life. An element of the new model is that they bring pieces of work with them to talk us through elements of provision that they've thoroughly enjoyed. And we utilise that to reach our evaluations. So their voice plays a key role for us in hearing what is going well and what is not.
Just to finish then, so I mean, you mentioned the work of the Inspectorate following up on it really informs policy. So I know there was like that preventative curriculum, piece that you did was a specifically commissioned piece of work. But if there is a theme developing in your inspections, we've talked a lot about mental health and well-being, for instance, here around the how schools implement that emotional health and well-being framework. Does that get fed back through the system? And I just ask for a short answer on this to the department, if there is a sense that maybe provision that the strategy isn't quite matching up with delivery on the ground.
I was just going to say that yes, there is that commitment from the department certainly to follow up. If you looked at the PE report, you'll see that that commitment was made that we would follow up on the PE survey in a 2-year period. But that was with the agreement of the department, because the department then set up the Task and Finish group on PE, and we will look at that work in due course. But it is very much that iterative process. As we move back into inspection at each point in time, we continually feed back to our policy colleagues while retaining our independence always in the evaluations that we make. Apologies, Nicola, there. No problem. When we see a theme emerging, we then tend to work in terms of, we then have identified maybe effective practice in an area that we're seeing that needs to be disseminated more widely. So we'll identify a firm and then report. So it can be in case study format or anything like that, so that we're ensuring that iterative piece of our findings are coming to a product that allows that to be disseminated more widely.
And that's crucial
also
with your
just
new approach.
our biannual report, which takes system-wide issues, from the Chief Inspector, as well as our annual reports to the department, would take issues that we're finding across inspections and would highlight them then.
Yeah, I think important. As I said, positive stuff as well. The good practice that gets disseminated, I think that's really important. And I think your written briefing was really clear. This is about celebrating the good stuff as much as it is about highlighting any issues. No, I thank you for your responses and all that. I'm going to hand over to the Deputy Chair if you're wanting to come in at this stage.
Thanks. In your briefing paper, you mentioned that you meet with the Inspectorate in the South and to see how you can learn from one another and how you working jointly can produce the best results. And this joint work was identified as an example of best practice by the ESRI. And the ESRI has also flagged up that educational outcomes in the South significantly surpass outcomes in the North. And I'm just wondering, in your work with the Inspectorate in the South, have you gained any insight as to why that disparity exists?
That's not a conversation we've had in relation to that specific report. So that is something that we can look at in due course. But we do discuss all of the educational issues. What I would say is we would need to look at that in detail with our colleagues, as opposed to thinking about it just in isolation in any way, because I think with any report there are complexities around how data is chosen and how data is selected in order to look at something. But absolutely, in terms of different outcomes, we will also be looking at any of the shared island projects, probably in conjunction with each other. So I think that allows an easier sharing of practice. But what we do also is we do inspector exchanges. So some of our colleagues will go and join inspections in the South, and also other colleagues will come up and work with us. That has been more difficult for us because of action short of strike, but hopefully we will get back into that whole area of work again. But I think they have complexities in their education system too, and we share an awful lot of the same issues that we're dealing with.
And in terms of those who go south from your own Inspectorate, have they reported back anything of note that you think should be implemented in the education system here?
Obviously, people will have various experiences that they have, and I suppose what I would caveat anything I'm going to say here with is the fact that, you know, for me, I may have a lot of views on experiences I've had, but the only thing I can report to you is what we actually have an evidence base for, and that is my job as Chief Inspector. Anecdotally, I would say that one of the things that they say that they find interesting and different, not necessarily better, but interesting and different, is obviously the year before leaving cert, where there is the option to take the additional year, and I think that's something that is worth exploring, but we don't know enough about that, I think, at this point in time to make direct comparisons between that and between what happens here. I think all young people, as we know, have different levels of maturity, and sometimes the opportunity for some type of gap year as such may begin to answer some of the issues that the chair was referring to there around the complexities of education, but that wouldn't be something that we would comment on in detail without actually doing a specific piece of work. So I'm talking very much about some of the comments that my colleagues make, as opposed to anything I would say very firmly.
Okay, fair enough. And moving on to another issue, in your 2021 report, Multidisciplinary Approaches to Meeting the Needs of Pupils in Special Schools, you stated that collaborative practice between education staff and multidisciplinary specialists is a significant and highly positive feature of a number of special schools. Now, the situation we're in at the minute, where there are a large number of specialist provisions being set up in mainstream, and we're also hearing that there's a shortage of the type of allied health professionals that are needed for that wraparound support. First of all, are you concerned that children with special needs, particularly in these SPIMs, aren't going to get the support they need? And are you, as an inspectorate, going to put a particular focus on those SPIMs? Thanks.
What I would say to you is that I think that had there not been Action Short of Strike, I don't think we would have found ourselves in exactly the crisis that we find ourselves in now, because had we been in schools continuing to do our work, I think some of these issues would never have got to the point where, never mind me be concerned, everyone is concerned, I think, at this point in time. And I would like to say that to the committee, in the sense that, you know, I think our day-to-day work, being in individual organisations, ensures that we are looking very specifically at those things. And I think it's unfortunate that we have found ourselves in that situation where, again, as you say, children who traditionally would be in special schools may not find themselves there. I'll hand over to Nicola, because she has looked at this in more detail, but I think the shortage of those links between the allied health professionals and professionals, of course, is going to be an area of concern, but I think we have to find a way to work through that at this point in time, and as soon as we can get back into our normal way of working, we will be able to report, I would say, reasonably quickly on the efficacy of what those approaches are. But we can't do that if we don't get access to the actual organisations and to the actual individual settings. So, you know, we would really welcome your support in ensuring that we can do that, because it is hugely important that those very vulnerable children are supported in the way they should be. So, Nicola, if you want to just give some of the detail.
Deputy Chair, don't mind if I could just come in terms of when you're saying our support to get access to those settings, what's blocking the access to those settings at the moment?
Action Short of Strike.
So
for us was the blockage. What I was saying, Chair, was because schools weren't cooperating with inspection, and individual inspection would flag up the type of things that Pat is talking about there.
We hope we're out of that phase.
We hope
now,
we're out of that, yes.
Okay.
And our intention is to start our implementation in September. So, for example, over the last term, some of our own statistics, for example, we've been in around 500 classrooms. Just from Easter until now. That's the speed at which we can start actually implementing a piece of work like this that we've been denied the opportunity to do. So when we are in schools, even in a mainstream classroom, we will always look at children who have statements or at the whole range of the ability within a classroom. But clearly, SPIMs have grown very rapidly over a very short period of time, and we have not had the opportunity to look at those in the way we normally would. So I hope that we can do that reasonably quickly. But Nicola, you have some background.
Yes. I mean, it's always concerning when children don't get access to either high quality education or the health service that they require. So I think everybody should be concerned about that when that isn't happening. For us, looking at reports such as the Ipsos Independent Review of Education of Special Educational Needs report, and other reports, the Northern Ireland Audit Office, the Public Accounts Committee report looking at SEN, we know that there is a piece of work to be done to help our children who have special educational needs. For us, looking at what we could do in an Action Short of Strike context, we focused on 3 elements. We were looking at the teacher professional learning to support pupils with special educational needs. We were looking at specialist provisions or learning support centres, as they were previously referred to, and we were looking then at the statementing process. And that's the piece. Those are the 3 pieces of work that we've been taking forward through last year and this year. And we published our Teacher Professional Learning to Support Pupils with Special Educational Needs evaluation. It's a very long title. In December 2023. And that showed that our teachers need more support. So back in 2017, we made a recommendation that was that teachers required a career-long access to training to support pupils with special educational needs. The focus can't be on initial teacher education, because initial teacher education has to deal with the fundamentals of good quality teaching, and special educational needs training tends to build on that. So our recommendation in 2017 was focused on looking at what happens in initial teacher education, but then focusing on our teachers on induction, our newly qualified teachers, and then a career, that continuous professional development to support pupils who have special educational needs, so that teachers in the classroom can meet the educational needs of the children in front of them. And our report in December 2023 shows that there are gaps in that access and inequity in access across special schools or mainstream schools to the types of training that teachers need. And our report puts forward suggestions, practical suggestions on how that work could be taken forward to help teachers feel empowered. The change we seek it has to be us. And with that, I'm thinking...
And Nicola, has there been any discussion with the department or the EA in terms of implementing those recommendations?
Yes, frequent conversations, Pat, because it's crucial that this work is taken forward at pace. So I have to say that the Education Authority, one of the key issues was that teachers didn't know what training was available, and they didn't know how to access it, and they didn't have access to it. So one of our recommendations, and it may seem very basic, but it was to have a centralised repository of all of the training that is available so that people can access it. And that work is already in train and is now being launched by the EA so that teachers can access that training. We need to have a look to see what exactly that offer is, and we need to see the quality of the offer. And we will be keeping an eye on how that work is progressing.
And just finally, Chair, one quick one on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with the progress being made on that?
I think progress, we have to take things in steps. Children need things now, and
we've stopped using numbers.
It sounds like a low number.
It's a complex landscape. It is a complex landscape when we work with.
I think, in fairness, the end-to-end review within the department is encompassing this, and so it's less obvious in a way, but those changes are happening. As Nicola said, piece by piece, those are happening within the context of the department's Learning Leaders Strategy, which is the broader professional development strategy. But it is not by accident. You have 2 reports in front of you. Nicola is talking about special educational needs. All of these reports are highlighting the lack of professional development and the lack of access to professional development for our best resource over a considerable period of time. Some of that has been down to Action Short of Strike as well, but I think it is crucial for all of us to work collaboratively in that space of looking at professional learning for our colleagues. We can spend millions of pounds on all sorts of initiatives, and we spend lots of time tracking them and finding out if they've been successful, but in actual fact, our best resource is our human resource, particularly of our teachers and the rest of the workforce. And I think each report is highlighting the fact that that consistency of access to professional learning is not where it needs to be in our system at this point in time. And, you know, I really would want to emphasise that, because special educational needs is one area, and the two other areas we have under consideration today emphasise it very clearly, and our teachers are telling us that and trusting us, I think, to actually report that back to yourselves.
And that, I think I gave a bit of extra time to that, because I think, you know, we're going to be hearing, we hope, from the department in detail around the whole transformation agenda around SEN after recess, and I think we should not lose sight of how critical the empowering teachers to actually deliver for children with special educational needs. It's critical, but there are the challenges of resource. Schools don't have the money to pay for training; they simply don't have it, and with teacher workload and those pressures, they often don't have the time. So there are challenges there in terms of how you operationally roll that out to ensure that teachers access it. But I think it was a really clear recommendation of the independent review that professional development for teachers is a vital element of our education system. We wouldn't tolerate it in the health system that a consultant just stops upskilling. You know, we would not tolerate it. But those educating our children, often there is a sense that, you know, that the training has been on hold for a long time, and that doesn't seem appropriate. But David, you'd wanted to come in just on this point, and then I'll bring you.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. It was just to make sure I picked you up right. You're understanding the need for ongoing professional development and so on, as Nick's talked about, and you do in health have revalidation and so on. It's very important. But are you saying that we shouldn't be looking at instituting that at the initial teacher training at all in terms of being mandatory? Because
I mean, it's currently an optional module for teachers to have that, and it's a useful module, and I know that they're wanting to make it compulsory for all teachers to have experience now in special schools, and I think all of those moves are the right moves in the right direction. So I wouldn't be saying not to be doing that.
It's building braces rather than saying.
But the complexity of need of children, it is difficult to meet the needs of children with special educational needs, given the complexity, and it takes an understanding of pedagogy that needs that bit more in terms of masters in special educational needs, PhDs in elements of special educational needs. There's a lot to it, and you need to have a really clear understanding of what good quality literacy teaching looks like. What does it look like if children, particularly I'm thinking of children with neurodiversity, and we do know that the fundamentals of teaching in that period of time, it's a 4-year course. If we want it to be an 8-year course, then that brings with it all of those other issues, whereas our report in December is saying have that initial teacher education piece to allow teachers to come out with the competencies, but with that recognition that this is a career-long piece, because the needs of children today are not the needs of children tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think
I understand that development. It's more a case of having talked to some of the special schools locally that some feel when they're trying to access staff, it's very difficult because those teachers that are available either haven't had that experience or feel intimidated by the idea of becoming involved with a special school because they don't have that grounding, and therefore the mandatory putting it in as a mandatory part of their initial training would give all teachers at least some kind of level of understanding of teaching within that environment. And therefore, yes, of course, if they're going to go down and make a career in that, there'll be a further degree of specialism needed, but that foundation level probably, it feels to me in the discussions that we've had so far, and I'm not no expert clearly, but that it would be beneficial for all teachers to have that grounding.
Absolutely, yes.
Thanks.
Might not have time to bring you back in again.
No, that's fine.
Robbie, if you want to come in.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but I'm going to jump on David's point, if you don't mind, because I think this is really, really important that we flesh this one out. Because previously we'd had this discussion around autism and making it a mandatory component, and I'm going to use my own experience. When I came out of the training service, either as a prison officer or a firefighter, I literally wouldn't have been very good at my job. I wouldn't have had the experience that you get on the job. I imagine teachers are the same. So I'd pick up on your point, Nicola, which would probably point to the fact that what's more important than the initial piece, I would be as bold as to say, is that experiential learning and ongoing continuous professional development. And that, if that is the case, I would have a concern at the moment with what direction they're taking with regard to these SPIMs, because I think we're, in terms of the units that are being provided both onto mainstream school, that if we just did the mandatory training aspect at the start, but might be leaving some of our teachers vulnerable in regard to they've ticked the box, they said they've trained and this is the best, but is it in the best interest of the children? And if that's the case, if I'm kind of half right, have ETI developed any methodology or a roadmap to how CPD could be done for teachers if this is the direction that the department and the EA are going to take for these kids?
I think with all training, even the term autism, the actual needs of that individual child, the diagnosis of autism does not tell you what strategies you need to deploy for that child. You need to know that child, you need to know where their strengths are to be able to build on and to know that child and that's why the engagement of the parent is crucial, so that you can see what works for the child and what doesn't. So the training helps in terms of some strategies, and Middletown Centre for Autism have a fabulous model for how they roll out their training. That's a very impactful way for teachers to engage and to build their confidence in their ability, rather than looking for an external source to come in to support. And that confidence is really important for teachers to be able to say, I know you as a child, I can work with your parent to provide, to put things in place to help you to progress. So what's next for you as a child, rather than you're a child with autism and therefore I will do this. It's about those conversations, I think, and that is a skill set that requires experiential learning alongside the theoretical side of it all.
And to add, in the TPL for SEN report, we did report that there were clusters being formed naturally in area learning communities where actually practitioners were coming together to actually share their experiences, and that's part of that experiential learning that you will see, where practitioners will come together, they will share the challenges within their own school community, and that's where practice also builds up as a reflective practitioner, and we see evidence of that on inspection, and we're seeing that across the piece when you transition into work-based learning. For instance, there's the Skills for Life and Work programme, where a lot of these young people are actually now presenting, and you can see in our reports that we've recently published on our website that a lot of these learners are actually presenting with these needs, and you're again seeing the challenge of tutors and vocational tutors actually having to say, how do we address the need? So it's all about really professional dialogue, conversation, making sure that there is practice in place that you can actually disseminate and share. So I think we play a really important role in identifying that practice, in seeing where it is and being able to affirm what is going well in the system, who is doing well, but there are absolutely challenges that we acknowledge for teachers, for tutors, in terms of dealing with it in the here and now.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to stretch it one out, but I'm not going to, because I want to ask about ETI specifically, if that's okay. So a couple of questions. One, I think, and I hope I didn't miss this in maybe a reply to the chair, but the review of the thematic report into PE is due. Has it started? Is it complete? And if it is, could you tell us about that? And is ETI resourced to qualitatively and quantitatively carry out the inspections? And then at that point, what teeth do ETI have in holding anyone accountable, and what does that look like?
We have to ask to keep answers very brief on this. Robbie's given you a lot. May not be doable, but Robbie's come in right at the end of his time with basically a whole new set of questions. So I will have to ask for that to be a brief answer.
It is our intention to start looking at the follow-up to the PE survey in the upcoming academic year, because we need to allow time for our practitioners as well to actually get the opportunity to review that process. So in terms of our resourcing, we have a range of specialist inspectors. As we said, we're a unitary inspectorate. We all come from a range of backgrounds in terms of specialisms, and once we're in the organisation, then we work in at least 2 areas so that we broaden our understanding, because we see ourselves as professional evaluators of education as opposed to that we necessarily formally worked in that area. So traditionally we would usually have at least 2 PE specialists in terms of post-primary, and then a number of our primary specialists will have had PE as their background. So we try to keep a range of expertise across our organisation. At this point in time, our resource is depleted, And so we are struggling around the area of PE in terms of post-primary PE. We have only one inspector at this point in time as opposed to two, but she can do the work of two and, in terms of her expertise. But I think equally then we will be going out to recruitment for another inspector in that area. So I think we're content enough that we managed to cover all of the specialisms that we need to cover, but our resourcing has been depleted, and so we will need to build back to full capacity as an organisation, and that will take a bit of time for us to do that. In terms of the having teeth, I think the important thing is that we do have that long tradition of working with all organisations. I have to say I feel privileged doing the work that I do, but I think people do respect the evaluations that we make. As I said, with particularly the RSE, for people to actually say to us how uncertain they felt about delivering aspects of that rather than pretend or put their best foot forward, I think shows the trust and respect that people put in us to actually carry something forward. I think if you feel that, as I said originally, if you've been treated, the evaluation is objective and transparent and fair, then there is something in every teacher which is professional which is vocational, as well as professional, that you want to do your best for the children. There is no other reason for you to be there. So some of that is inbuilt, I think, in the teaching profession. Nevertheless, in the previous inspection process, as I said, we had follow-up inspections, so we would continue to monitor once an inspection has taken place to ensure that the improvements that need to be made will actually be affected in due course in our revised inspection framework. We've made a decision that every organisation will have some type of follow-on activity, even if it is a wonderful organisation, because that allows us to actually look at dissemination of the most effective practice and what we would call next practice, where we can really see cutting-edge practice in our system and take that forward. So as I said earlier, our organisations know that we didn't go away during Action Short of Strike, but I hope that we have those effective professional relationships where that will actually happen. But we will formally report, as always. Again, on PE, we will bring that to the department, because obviously that's to whom we presented the first report. And again, there has been that commitment in the absence of the Assembly from our Permanent Secretary at that point in time, that all of our reports would be responded to by our policy colleagues, and that we would formally then report on those in due course. So there is that cyclical process which is really much focused on quality improvement. And as I say, in some of the other jurisdictions, it's an inspection and it finishes. But for us, there is the ongoing work with organisations, and our district inspector will always remain with the organisation. So I hope that indicates how the teeth that we have are teeth that are working constructively, I hope, and positively with the system, but the improvements are affected over a period of time.
I've had an indication from Cara online. Is there anyone else in the room who's looking to come in at this stage? No? So, Cara, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel, for being here today. I just have two questions, so I'll do them back to back. One is around when we talk about high quality education and inspection. I'm just intrigued to hear your perspective of the role of phones in school and distracting our young people, what your take is on that. And secondly, I would love to hear your perspectives on, we've had some back and forth with the department about rules and regulations around bullying and reporting bullying, and I'd imagine inspection plays a role in that as well. So I just love to hear your perspective on those two issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose our view of the world of technology in general is that it is a tool that is there to be utilised by us as human beings. And I suppose one of the things we would say about education, and particularly education for the future, is that we have to educate our young people to keep ahead of all of the technological changes so that they can be in control of that situation. So I think, as you say, the issue of phones at this point in time is one which is highly sensitive and controversial, because there are so many extremes, I think. And I think that's something that we we will continue to look at over time, because you have, of course, the issue of distraction. You have some of the issues that are related to RSE that we've actually reported on, particularly in relation to bullying, and some of that taking place outside the control of the school because of it being online. But equally, if we don't educate young people to actually use the technology and be in control of the technology rather than the other way around, to know how to navigate that technology effectively, then we're actually denying them an opportunity for a fully rounded education. So I think this is an issue that we have to actually build some sort of consensus around. I wouldn't, Cara, give you a hard and fast answer at this point in time, because I know it is an issue that is really current, and I think we have to look at all aspects of it. We produced a digital technology piece earlier in this year, and again, you know, if you think since COVID, our teaching profession in particular have really upskilled around all of that area. And I think the important thing is how we help young people to actually think about how they scrutinise everything that they are using in terms of the technology. And I think that our schools will find ways around this if we work collaboratively together to find ways that support schools when it becomes a discipline issue, which is obviously one of the issues that schools are worried about in terms of the use of mobiles in school, versus the idea of the impact of the technology then because of young people and teachers feeling that they are a slave to their phone, as opposed to the idea of actually thinking, how do you navigate the whole world of technology successfully? So I hope that gives you an honest answer as to where I think we are at this point in time. And could you just remind me of your question on bullying? I know you asked a question there.
You actually touched on an aspect of it there. It was just to do with, I suppose we've heard from the department about the Addressing Bullying in Schools Act, and how there's no sort of onus on the Board of Governors to report back. It's not complicated. And I'm just wondering, do you think there's more of a robust take that we could take in Northern Ireland on bullying? Because what we noted as a committee was the lack of monitoring, the lack of data meant that we don't know if it's homophobic, misogynistic, we don't know the nature of the bullying. But thank you very much for your points there around the phone. I think it's interesting. In County Wicklow, schools made a shared agreement to get phones out of the way, but I think you're right. I think there's opportunities there. And we did hear from the independent panel review about potentially the future in AI and job creation. But yes, just a wee point on bullying would be great. Thank you.
And yes, and I think just the whole concept of bullying, I suppose, for us, because we go into organisations and look at everything about that organisation around the culture and ethos of the organisation, we wouldn't necessarily separate bullying out as something that we would see as, well, we look at this, because what we want to see is what is the culture that is actually being created in the school. And if you have a culture which is created in the school, we've asked around the vision of the school, when you are in an organisation and you are there for 3 to 4 days in that organisation, you begin to absorb a sense of how is behaviour managed in this particular setting. And I think what you've described in terms of the data, I think is important, but the data is only a starting point, I think, then, Cara, because for us, our view, I suppose, is that data informs our inspection process, but ultimately it is then about looking beyond the data and using that as an entry point to see what are the actual issues that are in an individual organisation, but also that are pertaining to the experiences of those young people in that particular context at that time. And as we've talked about special educational needs, every single organisation that we go into is unique and different. And so we try to tailor what we do to try and support those skills then to look at what we would describe as positive behaviour management, obviously, in those kind of situations. But I think, there's all those various forms of bullying that you have referred to. I think telling people not to do it is not going to work. It is about trying to ensure that there is a culture where young people actually know that it's how they engage with each other, and back to the relationships part of RSE, how they build positive and supportive relationships with their peers and with everyone else whom they encounter in life. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to that.
I mean, when we're on inspection, we do look at addressing bullying policies or anti-bullying policies. We do look at the promoting positive behaviour policy. We look at behaviour for learning policies, all types of policies.
But ultimately, I'm just thinking of the last two months that we've been on inspection, and you know, we in those 500 and odd lessons that we've been in, you get that feeling of where things are at in terms of a culture of disclosure and saying how people are feeling, and just that emotional literacy within the organisation, and that's so crucial. So sometimes the numbers can give you a picture that tells you that this is a culture of disclosure here. This is an important piece rather than this is a school with issues around bullying. And it is that cultural piece that we see the outworking of those policies. We talk with the governors, we talk to them about the information that they're getting. We're looking at some of the data around attendance, suspension, expulsion, and trying to see some of the practice that's there, whether it's restorative practice, whether we see all of the different strategies that schools can use to try to ensure that children know that they're valued and that they're welcome and that they are that the staff there want to be there to be able to help them. And that's the culture that we want to see in our schools. So sometimes the data it's about getting underneath that and actually seeing the outworking of the policies that are in place and ensuring that schools are reviewing that so that they're very child-centred, because we know that our children are going through difficult times, whether it's, you know, an increase in social behavioural and emotional well-being needs, whatever. We know that our children need the teachers to be advocates for them.
Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I had an indication for Kate there. So
thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sir. So interesting. And Nicola, lovely to see you again. I've got a couple of questions. The first is, Nicola and I were at an event last night where St. Pat's, Our Lady in St. Pat's Knock, launched a Female Voices a document on curriculum to tackle sexism and misogyny. And yeah, just interested in some of your thoughts on that. And as an inspector, what kind of your take on that was. I'm really interested. My second, I was going to ask about preventative curriculum, but actually, while we've been having this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about newcomer children, and to get a sense of to get your views on kind of how schools are dealing with this, because our demographics are really changing. And we talk a lot about SEN, but I'm very worried about newcomer children, especially asylum seeker children who are moving around different schools, and kind of how you see schools dealing with that and how you assess that. Yeah, for starters, I've forgotten my third question, but I'll leave it with those now.
Go ahead, Nicola. Well, first of all, thank you. Yes, last night was fabulous. Great to see Our Lady in St. Patrick's taking this issue and empowering the children to move this forward. Those young people last night were just an absolute credit to the school. What I did say, though, to the principal last night was that I wasn't there in an evaluative role, so I won't be invited to anything if I keep going and evaluating the work. What I will say, however, more generally, is that that type of work where a teacher facilitates young people to take control of their own learning and to see, because they're well placed to say what the younger cohort of pupils want, or what's relevant to them, what they need for life. And I think that was an excellent example. I look at our preventative curriculum report and I look at what needs to happen next, and one of the first things is about empowering young people. And that was so evident last night. So I thought it was a fabulous initiative, fabulous to see the head of PE really empower the children there, and it's that kind of thing that we want to disseminate. And we see such fabulous practice in our schools that it's important that we do disseminate that more widely.
I think that's actually a role for the committee as well. I'm going to suggest that we get the young people to come in and present their work, because that encourages other schools to do more of that as well.
When it comes to the newcomer piece, I'm conscious that we've just published a report with for a pilot inspection of a school that has 75% newcomer children, and one our going forward for that is the dissemination of the highly effective practice to support children with who are newcomers. So there's some excellent work going on, and there are some schools that are struggling. So I think it will be important for us to
to affirm the good practice that is there and to provide support through our district inspector roles to be disseminating some of the better practice that's there. What is effective practice and how can that be shared? Yeah.
Yep, happy with it. Thank you.
Okay. I have no other indications at this stage, so I'll finish up with just a final question. It would be for a very, very quick one because it's a big topic. But one thing that does come up is around the inspection of RE and the fact that doesn't sit with yourselves. And look, it may be that you're not able to express a view on this, but I mean, do you have a view around whether or not there is a need to bring that under the auspices of ETI? I mean, I'll put my cards on the table. I would have a concern that we do just seem to have one part of our curriculum that doesn't maybe get the scrutiny around accountability and the policy development and the sharing of good practice and all of that that you outlined at the start. So I just wonder if there was a view, and it would just be for quickly, but just in terms of taking that forward.
Yeah, my understanding is that is in legislation,
Yes.
so there, we really don't have any control over that, and I suppose we do what we, as I said, what is our statutory duty to do. What I would say is that schools can request to have RE inspected by us. That will tend to happen in the post-primary sector where there is examination, RE in particular. But the other side of that will be that sometimes schools will request us to inspect their provision for RE, because I suppose it is that issue of a community of learning in a school, and there are times when teachers feel that they have almost been left out of the process, particularly if things have turned out well for the school. So the option is there, and I think at the moment we're probably content with that, because I think that allows the choice around that particular issue, which is to do with moral and family values, obviously, to be something which is considered separately, but equally it is down to the Chair of Governors then to make a request, and by and large we will say yes to a request if we receive one.
I'm just conscious it's an area of the curriculum where there's a lot of reliance on third-party provision, and again, just that accountability piece to just be understanding who's coming into schools, how are those decisions taken, and who scrutinises that. But understand your role is set out in legislation. But no, that's fine. Are there any other indications at this stage, or are we content to leave it there? Look, I really appreciate your time, and I think we are hopefully at a really good juncture in our education system where your functions can now continue as they should have done, but with this new framework in place, that we hope that the positive reception continues with schools. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just yourself. Is there any actions arising from that? I'm not aware if there's anything that we particularly agreed to take forward, but I thought it was a very helpful briefing session in terms of just where we're at in terms of that inspection piece.
Yeah, I think both briefings were had great energy and really interesting, and I have checked whether Hansard could provide a retrospective transcript of each of those, and they have said that they'll do that for us, so we'll send that out to you, or they'll actually send that out to you whenever it's ready. And because they're both worth, I think, a reread. I'm not sure when that pilot report of inspection of schools with newcomers is coming out, but I'm sure that's on their website.
It said it's been published already.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was to be published. No, that's great. You just said something about wanting young people to present their work to the committee.
From the
maybe
specific school. Yeah.
It was honestly the most brilliant event. They have come up with a resource for tackling sexism and misogyny through LLW, but it's got lesson plans, it's got everything really professionally done alongside Queen's. The teacher, the head of RE, has facilitated it, but the young people have really driven so much of this. And it was really innovative, and I think we talk about getting young people's voices into the committee, and that's an example. So yeah,
I think we definitely. I think we were all struck when we did have some youth stakeholders in for young people themselves, that we really were only scratching the surface, and we had talked about maybe a specific event for young people to give different groups the opportunity to showcase the issues they were concerned about. I mean, that's one we could potentially factor in for that and take forward after recess.
I was going to say, from what you're talking about, the lesson plans and all the rest of it, feels like a different kind of engagement might be better than having just them. Not. I mean, I understand sometimes you want to.
I would agree. I'm not
just
necessarily sure something is best showcased, but you know, I think maybe actually that given the opportunity, the committee the opportunity to really get down into the detail of that with the group.
Well,
so
it may tie it either with that if we do have a session for children, for young people, or maybe something to tag on with curriculum
development
down the line as well. But we can revisit after the.
If
I know they're writing to us with their reports.
Absolutely. Well, I think if that's noted for forward work planning, I think that's definitely worth taking away. Okay, so that just brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is correspondence. So I'll just, as usual, take everybody through any items where we've identified the potential for an action to be decided by committee, and otherwise it will be as per disposed of as per the summary noted page 119. And I would just refer members to pages 119 to 147 in their packs, and then there's also tabled papers where more has come through. So item 8.2, that's a response from the Department of Education on post-19 special educational needs provision. So I think my suggestion would be is that we should share that with Caleb's Cause NI, and certainly invite feedback from them in relation to that. Are members agreed? Item 8.5, page 127, a response from the Department of Education in relation to the use of CCTV in classrooms. Are members content to share that response with the individual who originally raised those concerns? Agreed? Item 8.6, page 130, response from the Education Authority in relation to indoor air quality. The correspondent that initially raised the issues has written again. Item 8.11 on page 147 and item 8.13 at page 30 of tabled papers. And there's an article included there on air purifying equipment in schools in Hertfordshire, and asking the committee for its view on next steps. I would like to suggest really that given that this individual has corresponded with us a number of times on this, and there's been a little bit of correspondence back and forward with Department and EA, it can be sometimes difficult to track all that, and I would like to suggest that we maybe invite the individual to brief the committee at one of our informal sessions really on where she sees the state of play and anything that specifically that she feels should be taken forward in terms of policy development. Or would members be content with that? Great. And then item 8.7, page 131, that is a copy of correspondence from the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee for the Economy to the Minister of Economy and Education, and it's in relation to how they've set out a perceived lack of cooperation between the two departments in developing the childcare strategy. I would propose at this stage that we note, and look, I'm happy to take members' views on this. I mean, I think we have emphasised repeatedly the need for collaboration between those departments and other departments, and we have certainly done so in relation to the childcare strategy. So I'm content to note it and to confirm we will certainly continue to make those points. But unless any other members have any suggestions of a more formal response to that, we agreed to note. Item 8.12, page 28 of tabled papers, that's a response from the Department of Education regarding the Northern Ireland Forest School, and it's really the proposal here would be that we share the response with the Northern Ireland Forest School Association, and again invite them to come back to us for feedback. Are members agreed? Agreed. Item 8.14, page 31 of tabled papers, correspondence from an individual regarding concerns about the Education Authority processes for SEND pupils. It's a very, very detailed piece of correspondence, but I think there's a lot in there that crosses over with issues and concerns that we have raised. So I would propose that we do send that to the EA to request its response to the specific points raised. Are members agreed? Agreed. And then item 8.15, page 37 of tabled papers, is correspondence from the NSPCC with a request to give oral evidence to the committee as part of the RSC inquiry. Are members content to schedule an NSPCC briefing and to just reflect that in the forward work plan? Obviously there will be lots of other stakeholders seeking to provide evidence, but I think as a very key voice in terms of child protection issues in Northern Ireland, I would be content to respond positively to that request. Are members agreed? Agreed. And then item 8.16, page 38 of tabled papers, is a response from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission on accountability regarding the use of restraint and seclusion in educational settings. Are members content that we forward that to the department for their reply? Members agreed? Agreed. And then finally, item 8.18, page 42 of tabled papers, and that's a response from the Education Authority in relation to the correspondence that we've had on a number of occasions now in relation to Beachlawn Special School. Again, are members content that we share the response with those who've flagged these issues with us previously and seek their feedback? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. I have nothing else in correspondence to highlight unless any other members do. So other than that, are we happy to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note? Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, that takes us to the next item in the agenda, which is the forward work plan, and that's draft forward work programmes available at page 150. So I'm just going to ask the clerk to speak to that, but I mean, I think there has been, through David, a number of additional proposed expert witnesses in relation to the RSE mini inquiry, which I think just clerk can draw members' attention to. But other than that, it would really be to seek endorsement of the programme going forward. So I'll just hand over to you, clerk. On that
Yep, certainly, Chair. So in respect of the expert witnesses, I would propose that members agree to add those three that David has recommended to the list of witnesses that are going to be contacted, and also perhaps that we could just give them a heads up about the terms of reference of the inquiry before the summer, although they're also academics and they're not going to work all summer, but they may appreciate a bit of notice if they're going to publish anything.
Yeah, I think my sense would be I've had contact from some stakeholders as well. I mean, while we're launching a formal consultation in September, I don't think there's anything to be lost by letting the expert witnesses and any of our key stakeholders identified, just in terms of those terms of reference, if they need a bit of time in the summer to be getting organised for responding to the consultation. Are members content with that? Agreed. Okay.
Are you happy with that, David?
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything more about them, or
No. I say some of them. I haven't had direct conversations with all of them, but it's just a case of I'm happy to have the terms of reference sent out to them on that basis. So.
And so other than that, I've just input the decisions that members made last week about having, for instance, SEND transformation end-to-end review updated quite soon, and the landscape review from EA. It would also be interesting to hear from the Audit Office, if possible, because they've done a lot of work in the education sector. And there are some in the other committee events. We have just booked space on a couple of occasions for some of these stakeholder events that we've talked about a few times. So that's just a question of prioritising. For now, I've put in anti-poverty stakeholders on that week of the 16th of September. And then, although we might have peaches in that space,
we may, we may do.
Now, actually, then sectoral and church stakeholders in education, early October, and that's the sports bodies then that we're removing from next week's planned meeting. So,
Sorry, can I just suggest? I see that Rebecca Lurder from Queen's is slotted in as an informal meeting in September, I think. If possible, if there's a slot, even if it's later on in the year, I would prefer to have a panel where we actually have evidence on newcomer children, and it doesn't need to just be Rebecca. There are people like the Children's Law Centre, STEP, who are doing really good work in this space, but I feel like it's very complex and there are a lot of problems here, and I think it warrants committee scrutiny.
And I mean, I think we've been clear that we wanted that briefing. So I think we've, and also to we can bring the EA in to speak from the statutory perspective to anyone else we hear. So I think a formal briefing is entirely appropriate if members are agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed. Okay.
Certainly.
Okay. Well, look, members can continue to feed anything in over the summer, even in terms of anything they want factored in. But conscious also that the clerk and the team do need some annual leave as well. So maybe don't be expecting responses as rapidly as we might normally get. Other than that, are we content to endorse the forward work programme? Agreed.
Okay.
Item 8. Any other business?
David? Most people have already been in the room when we were having the conversation earlier, but just following on from the discussion we had following the protest and that last week with Caleb's Cause and the discussion that's going on in different parts of the Assembly around the post-19 pathways for people who have SEND needs. Last Friday was up at Larch Belfast, and I know Kate's familiar with them as well, and I just thought it was an inspirational visit, and the staff that I had with me equally said it was one of the best visits they had done around some of the work they do with SEN adults, and providing them with work and roles that really give them somewhat of a work pathway, somewhere where they can feel safe, where they can make friends and develop post-19. And I think it would be really worthwhile, both people from our committee, but economy and that as well, but certainly be reaching the colleagues there to go and visit and see what's being done there. We're all familiar with, we've in East Belfast 4G Day Opportunity Services, and Orchardville, and some great people who work in that space. And as you were saying earlier, Chair, outside of the committee, was that there is a spectrum of work being done in that area that maybe isn't recognised in the whole bit. So important, I think, that we look at what is already there and what can be built on and the models that we can use. And I think Larch, for me, was something really special, and I think I would encourage people to go. I know this Friday they are having another open day. If anyone's available, I would encourage them to go. It's on Mance Road there, just into Kate's constituency, but fairly close to my own. So just to recommend that, Chair.
No, thank you for that, David, and that's really helpful. And I think one of the things maybe I probably should have mentioned, maybe when in correspondence around the post-19 stuff, I think when we're engaging with the department around SEN transformation, we need to make sure that strand, that is not, we don't just view this all through a skills-based lens. The transitions at the other end are absolutely crucial. So, okay. Anything else, Deputy Chair?
Chair, I just want to bring up the issue of the RAISE programme because I have just heard today that 3 schools in West Belfast have been told they're not eligible for funding under that scheme. One, Bunskull and Clevagive, is in the middle of Ballymurphy, one of the most deprived wards in the whole of the north. Another, Gael School in Namona, another Irish medium, 2 Irish medium primary schools. And nursery schools have been told they're not eligible, and St John the Baptist in Andersonstown. And I'm just wondering if we could get clarity around the criteria for funding and the funding model that's being used, because, there's a clear link between deprivation and underachievement, and if schools from some of the most deprived wards are being excluded, there seems to be an issue there. And I've also been told that the makeup of the children in the nursery schools within those schools are not taken account of either. So, we know about the importance of early intervention, so that seems counterintuitive completely. So,
if there was one thing that the independent review were hammering the point on, that the best early intervention you could do in terms of tackling educational disadvantages in early years, that's where it really counts. So, yeah, I'm certainly happy to propose that we write to the department for a little more information on how these decisions are being made about who has access to funding, and again how that early years profile is factored into those decisions. Does that cover that? Are members agreed on that? Agreed. Okay. Any other business? No. Okay, that's just on to item 9 then, and it'll be a while before we're back. Our next committee meeting is scheduled following the summer recess, and that will be Wednesday the 11th of September at 2 p.m, room 29. So
what year is that?
That is 2024. Sorry to disappoint you. And the question then just needs to be put that the committee meeting does now adjourn. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.